Hello, hello, hello. Sorry I'm late. I had a little things to do here to catch up, to get ready. I hope that you aren't too upset about it. Sorry. And as always, let me start by checking to make sure that you all can hear me. So if you can hear me, please raise your little hand to make sure that the audio is okay. Fantastic. Great, great, great. Let me put everybody's hand down and another show of hands to make sure that you can all see the screen. It should be purple and says neoliberal Leninism. And wait, let me just check. Oops, no, it's not saying that. Hang on, hang on, hang on. Let me just fix this because I screwed up. Sorry about that. Uh, hang on. Slideshow. And Microsoft PowerPoint, and there we go. Okay, let me do that show of hands again. You should be seeing it. It's a purple screen. Raise your hands if you see a purple screen with neoliberal Leninism. Yeah, fantastic, great. How y'all doing today? I hope well. I've had quite a week, and I have a very, very busy week. So I don't know if I'm looking forward to it or not. I can't tell you right now what, I might as well just tell you. What's happening is, if all goes well, I'll be leaving Holland on next Monday. Next Sunday, we'll have our regularly scheduled webinar, but the day after that, which is November 30th, I'm going to be leaving Amsterdam and I'm going to be riding my motorcycle across Europe. Hopefully, I'll be able to get to Ukraine, back home to my family, whom I miss terribly. You have no idea how much I miss them. And because finally, the business that I was doing here in Holland is done, it's concluded. Every last document was signed, everything is sealed and notarized and all the rest of it. And so, all done. And so now I can go back to Ukraine. Now, the reason I didn't go back to Ukraine before is because uh, do this silly lockdown. If I go to Ukraine, it is not clear that I will be able to return to Europe. In fact, it might be that I am not allowed to return to Europe because the passports I have, they're from countries that are red zone, red zone with this COVID bullshit. So I don't know what I'm gonna do. I might be stuck in Ukraine for months, years, decades, maybe. Who knows? So anyway, that's why I was stuck here in Holland and didn't dare go back to Ukraine because the rules really are crazy. But anyway, that's for another time. Right now, what I want to do is talk about neoliberal Leninism. Okay, now this is something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and I'm still in the process of developing my ideas. Okay. So what I'm going to be presenting to you today is the state of my ideas so far. Now, yesterday I released on my Gonzalo Lira channel a little video about this very issue. It had the same title even. And as I made clear in a post here on Patreon, it's not that I was recycling my material, but rather I wanted to do that one because I really want the term to be out in the zeitgeist. I want people to be thinking about it. Neoliberal Leninism, because I think it describes very neatly what we are seeing among the elites and why the elites are pursuing such ridiculous ideas and they're just doing stupid crap. Okay. And I think it kind of like explains it, or at least, or perhaps it doesn't quite explain it, but it gives a good handle and it makes it clear, which is the intention, that this is just a new version of communism, a new version of the democratic republic. Yeah, I um, I despise this whole notion of progressivism because I recognize that it's just communism with a new name. Communism with AOC as the cover girl, but it's the same shit. And communism is anathema to me. I have enough experience, both of my families directly in Chile as well as historically. I mean, I studied Russian history. I specialized in the Russian revolutions. I know exactly the kind of history that the communists inflicted on the great Russian nation, not only on Russia, but Cambodia, China, Vietnam. I mean, no, it's a horrifying ideology, and I see it encroaching on the West, and I see that this ideology is is becoming more and more popular. And that, to me, is just something that has to be fought. We have to fight these people. And so I figured that, my bit for the fight, as it were, is to sort of like explain it and give it a name and point to it better, make it more clear and draw stronger parallels between Leninism of the Bolsheviks and the Leninism of today, and draw the points that intersect, see, so that you can see it more clearly, how one is just an expression of the other. They're not different, they're the same, just different guises and little variations here and there. Some of the variations are kind of important, but once you look at it through this lens, you start to see, oh yeah, it is communism, but just with a corporate face. Okay. So anyway, let me get started with it. Okay. Let me make sure that everything is working properly. Okay, and there we go. Okay, this is, you guys, if this is the first time you're at a webinar of mine, usually I have like a one sheet with the entire outline of the show in just the one sheet so that you can see it all and see more or less where we're going. Unfortunately, there was so much material here that I had to do it into 2 slides. Now, this first one is what is Leninism and what is neoliberalism? And the third one, of course, the second one rather, is going to be all about what is neoliberal Leninism, okay? It's important to understand what Leninism is, important to understand what neoliberalism is, and only then move on to the modern iteration of it, the modern iteration of communism, by the way. That's what I'm talking about, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about communism, okay? Okay, so Leninism, the first thing that you have to understand is that, see, Marx, Karl Marx in Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto, he and Engels and a lot of his followers were of the opinion that the masses would spontaneously rise up and create socialism, and it would like spontaneously lead eventually to the communist paradise. You have to understand, these people were idealists. They were romantics. They were there in the period of the romantics, right? So they were of the opinion, oddly enough, even though they themselves despised the masses, Engels and Marx, they struggled all their lives not to be confused with the masses. They wanted to be seen as, upscale, intellectuals, and not, of the hoi polloi. But anyway, they were of the opinion that the masses would spontaneously shift from capitalism to socialism, and socialism would eventually lead to communism, and it would happen in England. They were convinced. And of course, it didn't happen, not throughout the 19th century, and these 2 gentlemen died and nothing had happened. And in the early 20th century, Vladimir Lenin came up with the idea of, obviously, Leninism. But what was that idea? It was the idea that the masses can never achieve a socialist utopia. They can never rise up to socialism and then transcend socialism into communism without the guidance of an elite, of a vanguard that knows the truth and can find the way. That was the key insight. Because, see, with Leninism, it gave the justification to the Bolshevik Party, the Bolshevik Communist Party. It gave a justification as to what was the point of the party. See, this is very important, because Leninism, the ideology of Leninism within Marxism, was basically how to explain that all the power was going to flow from the party, not the state, mind you, the party. The party was the nucleus of power. Why? And Leninism came up with this idea that it was because the party was the leading vanguard that would lead the masses to socialism and eventually the communist utopia. That was the key issue. And this gave the justification for all subsequent communist regimes to concentrate power in the party system, in the party bureaucrats, in the Politburo. It gave that justification. It was incredibly important, because without Leninism, the Communist Party in these different countries, in Communist China, in Vietnam, in, of course, the Soviet Union, in every place that communism has been tried, Cambodia, horrifyingly, under Pol Pot, well, without this justification of Leninism, these parties would not have been able, they would have been constantly fighting others for power. And what happened was that Leninism gave the justification for the party to destroy every other competing political party and be the one party, the one political party, the vanguard. You see? That was the justification for it. It was basically a power grab. That's what Leninism is all about. Okay? Now, quite apart from what Lenin claimed were the key traits of Leninism, these are some of the traits that you easily perceive in all communist regimes with a Leninist party. The first is that it has an ideology that does not match reality, but it serves to identify fellow believers. Okay, now, this is actually extremely important. It's actually almost the basis of the reason for the ideology. It's to identify fellow believers and have them all on the same boat, rowing in the same direction. And see, the ideology doesn't match reality. Communism, if you study communism, you realize it doesn't make any sense, because reality, as described by Marx, is not the same as actual reality. His description is sort of like a fantasy. He doesn't understand reality. He doesn't understand economic reality or political reality. Communism has never been about accurately describing reality. That's not the purpose of communist ideology, of Leninist ideology. The purpose of it is to identify those people who are friends, and more importantly, those people who are enemies. See? Because those people who disagree with Leninist ideas, communist ideas, or let me rephrase that. Anybody who disputes or disagree with or criticize the political ideology that the Leninist party espouses, in this case, communism, those people are easily identifiable as the enemy. And those who agree with the political ideology that the Leninist party espouses, those are friends. Those are allies by definition. You see the point of the ideology? It's think of it like this. It's I'm a Catholic, okay? So in Catholic doctrine, the Eucharist, which is that little round wafer that the priest holds up, which is the most important moment in the Mass, the Eucharist is the actual body and blood of Christ. When you take the communion, that is, when you eat the wafer that often has been dipped in wine, or at least wine has been spread on it, the Catholic doctrine says that that is actually the body and blood of Christ. Okay? That's the ideology. And so what does it serve? Well, there are going to be people who don't believe this. Lots of people. They're going to say, no, it's not. It's just a wafer that you dipped it in some wine, and sort of like watered down wine at that. It's not the body and blood of Christ. We're not cannibals. So obviously those are not Catholics who say that. Those are heretics. Those are, pagans. Those are not Catholics. But anybody who says, oh yeah, when the priest raises it up, after he's given his incantations and whatnot, that is the body and blood of Christ. And when I take communion, I am ingesting the body and blood of Christ to wash away my sins. Yeah. You see? I mean, you see the point? And look, I'm a Catholic, okay? If you're a Catholic and you're a believer, I'm not trying to insult anybody here, okay? I'm just trying to bring out the simile. And the simile, of course, is that Leninism, whatever its ideology, the more divorced from reality it is, the more effective it is. You see? And that is a key issue. Okay? And of course, believers will ignore or dispute or contradict or just tell the person bringing the contradictory evidence to just fuck off. No contradictory evidence is allowed against the ideology, no matter how compelling. Okay? I mean, like, I'm mentioning the Catholic issue, right? Again, remember, I'm Catholic, so I'm not shitting on Catholicism. I think that Catholicism is actually very beneficial in many ways. But if you actually examine the wafer, the Eucharist, under a microscope, an electron microscope. You do all kinds of scientific tests, and every single one is going to tell you that it's just a wafer of unleavened bread. It's not the body and blood of anybody, let alone of Jesus Christ, okay? And every Catholic will nod and say, yeah, sure, but you know, it is. You see? Now, of course, Catholicism, it's a religion, and everybody knows that, and everybody's just like, lets it slide and just, okay. But these ideologies that the Leninists are promulgating are political ideologies of how you should live, okay? It's something else. Now, a belief that this ideology is the only way to view the world, and that anyone contradicting, disagreeing, or critiquing the ideology is an enemy who must be crushed. That's a key issue of Leninism, because Leninism believes in the monopoly of power. The party has to have a monopoly of power. Any other group that challenges the what we call the party's monopoly on power, it has to be destroyed. And how does somebody challenge the monopoly on power? By disputing the tenets. That's the key issue. Disputing the tenets of the ideology. That's why all enemies have to be crushed. Okay. Now, Leninism also believed that the state is the vehicle for all that is good in the world. The state is the be-all, end-all, the most powerful institution, and of course, the party has to control the state. That's the point. There is a distrust of individualism and a belief in collectivism. Of course, because the party above all, not the individual. Forget about the fact that in every Leninist organization, eventually there has been one man at the top who has controlled it, okay? In the Hegelian Asiatic dictatorship. You study Hegel's political philosophy, he basically says that political organization always starts everywhere as an Asiatic despotism. That is, one man at the very top who is completely free, and then a pyramid of people below him who are enslaved to greater or lesser extent. The closer they are to the despot at the top of the pyramid, the more free they are, but they are limited in their freedom by, of course, not being able to eliminate the despot. The despot has ultimate and total freedom. And the people at the very bottom of the pyramid are basically slaves, whose lives are just to aggrandize the higher classes and the Asiatic despot. And Hegel believed, and his political theory stated, that the development of history was basically the spreading of freedom through the people, yet at the same time that freedom would be restricted so that everyone would be equally unfree and free at the same time, which makes sort of sense. That's kind of like the ideal of the Western democracies, that we're all free, yet at the same time there are certain inherent limitations on our freedom so that we can all live together at the same time without causing, a wreck and ruin of our society, which makes complete sense. You're not totally free. You are free within prescribed limits, but everyone has those same prescribed limits. Ergo, we are all equally free and equally unfree. That makes sense. Whereas the Asiatic despot who was at the top, he was the man who could do anything. And that, curiously enough, is what happens with Leninism every single time. At the top, there will be the one man, the Asiatic dictator, who controls everything and has total freedom. And all the people below him have less freedom than him. Less and less freedom, the greater the distance from him on the hierarchy. Lenin, Stalin, then later, in China, Mao, Pol Pot, Ho Chi Minh, although Ho Chi Minh, there are issues, but it's not really relevant for this conversation. The point is the same. In every one of these Leninist communist countries, be they Leninist, Stalinist, Leninist, Soviet, Leninist, Maoist, there was always the one man at the top, the one man who controlled the party, the one man at the very tippity top. And yet Leninism distrusts individuals and tries to crush individualism with a belief in collectivism, okay? Now, a belief in the ideology is the only way to achieve this great and wondrous future. And that's the whole point of the ideology. The ideology is a fairy tale telling its adherents that by following the ideology, eventually at some point in the future, you'll reach this manic nirvana. You'll be happy. You'll be in a earthly paradise. That's the whole point of it. Communism is basically a Garden of Eden. That's the whole point of it. I mean, religions have the same thing. And many people have pointed out, and you don't have to be particularly astute to point out the fact that Leninism, communism, and its different iterations of communism, but all of them espouse a paradise, just like religions espouse a paradise. But of course, in the religion, you reach the paradise after you die. But here in Leninism, you reach that paradise in life eventually. You might not live long enough to see it, but it will happen on this earth sometime eventually. Of course, it never has. It can't ever happen, but that's not the point of this. The point is to understand what Leninism is. Okay, that's the point of this conversation. Now, Leninism also possesses the belief that all methods are fair to achieve this utopia or fight those who disagree with this utopia, including distortion of information, cheating, and murder, and in slavery, and all kinds of other horror stories, okay? Which makes complete sense. I mean, think about it. You're working towards the creation of a paradise on earth. That's your goal. You are trying to create a paradise on earth, this communist paradise on earth. One day we will transcend socialism and achieve this communist utopia. And that's a wondrous thing. Everybody will be happy. No one will suffer. No one will go hungry. You know, everybody will have everything that they could ever want. It will be wonderful. It'll be a nirvana, a paradise. So, you know, if I have to, you know, cheat you out of whatever, that's okay. You know, I'm by any means necessary, man. I'm gonna get this this nirvana, this magic land, this paradise. So if I cheat you, or I lie to you, or you know, if I just, you know, go ahead and just shoot you in the head, you know, just a little bit, you know, big fucking deal, you know, it's a price worth paying to achieve paradise. Am I right or am I right? Let's have a show of hands. Hey, you fuckers who are listening to me, yeah, raise your hands if you think that it's okay to shoot anybody to achieve a nirvana. Raise your hands right now. I want to see a show of hands. Isn't it great that to achieve nirvana, we should just shoot people? Shoot whoever opposes us. Don't you agree? Yeah, lots of hands there. Yeah, you'd be good Leninists. That's the point, of course, you know. I mean, it's a horrifying notion. The notion that to lie and cheat and steal and murder are acceptable in order to achieve some paradise. Okay, and that's absurd, of course. It's absurd and it's horrifying, especially because that nirvana has never been achieved and cannot be achieved. And it's human nature. We will never achieve a nirvana on earth because the life of a human being is always one of struggle and unhappiness and dissatisfaction. And it's because of that unhappiness and dissatisfaction that we strive for a better life. So obviously, that will never arrive. But you see how the logic of the Leninist operates. They are going after something good. The more higher the level of the people, the more cynical you might think them to be. But it's very interesting. When you study, for instance, the life of Stalin, he really believed that one day this communist paradise would be achieved. And Stalin was a fucking mass murderer. He is a man who created, well, he didn't create it, it was Lenin who created the Gulag system, but he amplified it. I mean, he turned that fucker up to 11. But he really believed that one day they would achieve the communist utopia. They believed it. He believed it. And of course, that explains why he could sleep like a baby every night, having shipped off millions of people to the gulags to be to their deaths or to become essentially slaves, because they were. That's what the whole point of the Gulag prison system was. It was either to kill people who were political dissidents, to work them to death, or just to work people and use them as slave labor. Because the fact is, the dirty little secret of the Soviet Union is that its economy depended on slave labor. They could not produce all that was necessary with free labor, by paying people money. They needed slaves. And so that's how they got them, by way of the Gulag system. And as always, I recommend you read the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn that explains it in great detail, and it's a tragic history, and it's the truth. They needed slaves. But okay, again, I'm not, that's the Soviet system, the economic system, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in Leninism, okay? Now, finally, what's important to understand about Leninism is that it had a rigid hierarchy among themselves based on conformity to the ideology. Everybody in the hierarchy had to believe in the ideology. And you rose in the hierarchy by adding to the ideology, by adding books and ideas and articles, writing about it, expressing to others how convinced you were of the ideology. The true believers of the ideology rose in a Leninist system, okay? It wasn't, how can I put it? It wasn't merely political maneuvering. A lot of people who studied the Soviet Union tended to think that it was only political maneuvering that allowed them to rise. No, no, no. A big part of it was how much and how well they wrote about the ideology. And again, this mimics religions. Like for instance, in Judaism, you know, the great rabbis, they were the ones who wrote the great commentaries on the Torah and the Bible. And what you call it, these great rabbis, you know, they gained renown by the acumen, by the intelligence of what they'd written, you know, of reading the Word of God. You see, it wasn't that they were politicking and, you know, power plays or any shit like that. They were writing about the ideology, and that's how they got up. Same with Leninism. You see, they have this body of ideology, and you write about it, and you don't critique it. Remember, you never critique it. If you critique it, you're ostracized, you're destroyed because you're an enemy. No, you can't critique it. You have to say something that adds to the body of the ideology, and that's how you rise. Okay? Okay. Now, that's for Leninism. What's neoliberalism? Well, neoliberalism came up. It was a term of art invented by leftists in the 1960s. And they used the term neoliberalism to refer to unrestricted capitalism. Okay? And it gained more currency when Augusto Pinochet became the dictator of Chile in 1973, and he implemented a lot of economic measures that were prescribed by a group of economists, Chilean economists, most of them PhD, actually all of them PhDs, who had been taught in the University of Chicago under Milton Friedman and Milton Friedman's acolytes. These Chilean economists in Chile in 1973 had written a book called The Brick, El Ladrillo. El Ladrillo means the brick. The brick, like, you know, like the bricks that you use to build a house or whatever. And it was called that because it was a very thick book, you know, thick as a brick. That was the joke. That's where it came from. Anyway, this group of economists, you know, they implemented these basically economic reforms, and their critics called them neoliberalists. Okay, and the term neoliberalism stuck because also what happened was that the economic experimentation that the Chilean dictatorship carried out in 1973 was essentially copied by Margaret Thatcher in 1979 and later Ronald Reagan in 1981, when Thatcher and Reagan respectively assumed offices in the United Kingdom and the United States. And what happened with neoliberalism was a series of economic measures to get these countries out from under the yoke of nascent socialism, to harness free trade and to harness private initiative in order to jumpstart the economies of these countries. And in and of itself, neoliberalism was not a bad thing, okay? Now, when I'm talking about neoliberalism, I'm talking about the kind of neoliberalism that we are seeing now, okay? 40 years later. The kind of neoliberalism that we're seeing now is very different from what was implemented back in 1979, 1981, okay? Now, the first thing that you have to understand, and you have to understand this really, really well, is that neoliberalism is not capitalism, but it claims that it is. Neoliberalism has how can I put it, has co-opted the mantra that it is capitalist. And anybody who's opposed to neoliberalism is opposed to capitalism. And this is absolutely false, because first of all, it depends on misunderstanding two things: what's neoliberalism and what's capitalism. Let's start with capitalism because that's easier. You have to remember that capitalism, what is capitalism? Capitalism is the use of economic markets to price goods and services for the free exchange of those goods and services between consumers. Okay, that's what capitalism basically is. It's just a mechanism of social exchange by way of price discovery. Price discovery being, of course, where the curve of supply meets the curve of demand. When those two curves intersect, that's when you have the price discovery. That's when you discover the price of the good or service. Okay, it depends on how much demand there is and how much supply there is, right? It's just a method of resource allocation. That's what capitalism is. It's like a hammer, okay? A hammer is just a tool. You can do a lot of things with a hammer. A lot of things that you could, not only activities that you can do with the hammer, but also you can modify the hammer to be all kinds of different hammers for different purposes. You can modify it, limit it, expand it, do all kinds of things, okay? Or a better example of this would be like a set of pliers or something. I mean, just think of a tool. Any tool can be modified to be more useful in one activity or another activity. Capitalism, in and of itself, is just the concept of hammer. There are different kinds of hammers. There are, for instance, jackhammers, pneumatic hammers. Then there are hand hammers, the kind that is typical in the drawings, right? A little stick with a little metal thing that has a flat head, right? That's one kind of hammer. Then there are sledgehammers. Then there are, well, you see my point. There are all kinds of different kinds of hammers, just as there are different kinds of capitalism. There is regulated capitalism. There is unregulated capitalism. And there are good reasons why you would never want unregulated capitalism. Because, for instance, if we are living in an unregulated capitalist society, and I produce food, right? And I produce, say, sugar. But, I haven't produced that much sugar, and my beet crops didn't really work out that well. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add like a whole bunch of white sand, like chalk. Yeah, I'm going to add a whole bunch of chalk to my sugar and sell you this bag that I claim is a kilo of sugar, right? But it's actually, just like sort of like 200 grams of sugar and 800 grams of chalk. That's unrestricted capitalism, right? And, of course, you get cheated. And of course, we don't want that. And so we impose regulations on capitalism to ensure that the market participants don't fuck each other over. Yeah, because on the flip side, of course, I could be selling, a kilo of sugar, perfectly legitimate kilo of sugar, but you're paying me with a $3 bill, fake as can be. And I take this $3 bill and I'm like, this is fake money. And you're like, well, fuck you, buddy. You took it. So now the sugar's mine. I'm like, hey, what the fuck, right? That's another example of unregulated capitalism, which we don't want. A lot of people, especially ignorant people, think that only unregulated capitalism is acceptable. That's absurd. Because there are lots of situations where you would want the exchange of goods and services to be regulated by some outside force. First of all, so that the participants don't cheat one another. Secondly, because sometimes you want to limit or outright eliminate the sale of some good or service because it would be bad for the society, okay? Capitalism has always been regulated, always, 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 okay? Yeah, you can say that there are certain instances where capitalism is unregulated, but they're minor or inconsequential. In every society in history, capitalism has always been regulated because there is always extra economic priorities that everyone in the society agrees are very necessary to promulgate and protect. For instance, like the example of cheating one another in the transaction, that's one. But there are other things too that you want to prevent against, okay? So I'm not gonna go into the specifics, but you get the point, okay? Now, neoliberalism freed up the markets, and it's an economic ideology based on the following. It's based, first of all, on unrestricted application of comparative advantage, okay? Now I'm gonna get to that in just a minute. I'm gonna go through these items first, and then I'll go back to comparative advantage. The first is unrestricted application of comparative advantage, not just on a national level, but on international level, okay? Secondly, is the free movement of goods and capital. Free movement in the sense that there is no restriction and there are no tariffs, okay? Goods and capital can move between countries, let alone within a country, for free. I mean, not for free in some terms of cost of transportation, but with no government fees or tariffs or barriers, and no hindrance of any sort. Capital can flow from one country to the next, just ping pong along, no problem, and nobody bothers it. The same with goods or services, okay? Now, a third condition is deregulated labor markets. Now, this, of course, includes unrestricted immigration. And this flows back to the issue of comparative advantage, which I'll get to in just a second. Then there is the encouragement of private sector monopolies. Now, why would neoliberalism encourage monopolistic practices? Well, first of all, neoliberalism does not believe in restricting corporations. That if a corporation grows and grows and grows, let it. The market will figure it out. The market will deal with any problem. The invisible hand of capitalism will solve the problem if a company becomes too big to fail. Okay. And there's a key issue, of course, that monopolies are efficient. Competition is inefficient. It's inefficient on a social level, you see? Because if there's one company in a given industry, it can carry out economies of scale. All kinds of economies of scale happen in a monopoly or an oligopoly. An oligopoly, if you don't know, is when there are very few sellers in a given market. A monopoly is when there's only one seller in a given market. Monopsony and oligopsony are the inverse, when there's only one buyer or very few buyers in a particular market, okay? But for purposes of this conversation, let's talk about monopolies and oligopolies. That is sellers, not buyers, okay? So anyway, neoliberalism did not set out to encourage monopolies or oligopolies. It happened because neoliberalism believes that the state should not interfere in the competition in a given market. That is, if companies are competing with one another and one wins and the others lose, the state should just let it happen, which was not the case before. Because you see, especially starting in 1930 during the Depression, during the 30s, 40s, and on through the 1970s, the state would often interfere in the market and make sure, by way of antitrust laws, that no one player became dominant. This was because back at the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of the oil companies had become so-called trusts, and also the train companies had become trusts, that is, monopoly players. And that's where the notion of antitrust legislation came about. Teddy Roosevelt was a trust buster, and Teddy Roosevelt, the Republican president, because he was of the opinion, as many reformers were, that monopolies were very, very bad for consumers, which is true because they could price gouge consumers. The price of whatever good or service could be, say, 5, but since there's no competition, they can go and just charge them 50. Neoliberals believe that the market should decide, and so long as the monopolist was not essentially taking the piss out of consumers, i.e. price gouging them, then monopolies should be allowed to exist because they are more efficient, which is true, because monopolies can carry out economies of scale such that cannot happen when there is a lot of competition. When there's a lot of competition in a market, that is a lot of companies fighting for market dominance. I mean, say 10 or more in any given market. What happens is that none of them can achieve economies of scale because the suppliers to any one of them supply the other ones as well. And so those suppliers can charge more because they say, well, if you don't want to pay my price, there's your competitor who will pay me more. Whereas a monopolist can practice a monopsony. A monopsony, that is, since they are the monopoly player in a given market, they can turn to their supplier and say, hey, sell me this at $3, or else I won't buy from you and I'll find some other buyer. And so they say, okay, I'll sell to you for $3, you see? And so monopolies are efficient. This is known. This has always been known in economics, ever since David Ricardo in the 19th century. But the thing is, see, there was a notion that in the past, especially between the 1930s and 1970s, but even before that, as I said before, during the 1900s and 1910s and 1920s, that competition was good because even though the unit price was going to be higher because of competition, as compared to monopolies where it would be lower, the competition in and of itself led to a healthy market. And so it was better for the good or service to be more expensive because it would essentially be subsidizing the competition, which was a good thing, considered a good thing, because there was a terror of monopolies, because it was always thought that a monopoly would come to exist and therefore start to price gouge. And that's what wanted to be avoided. But neoliberalism said, you know, fuck that, and has allowed unrestricted private sector monopolies, okay? Now here's another terrible thing that is the effect of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism had nothing to say basically for the incestuous relationship between the state and the private sector. Now, because of that, you have a lot of times the public sector, that is the state, essentially protecting the private sector monopoly, because the private sector monopoly will essentially pay the state by either working for them in developing some good or service, or more to the point, paying lobbyists to get the politicians, the people who control the state, to help them out. And we see this all the time, and we see it in tech companies, we see it in every industry. The state and the private sector monopolies start working hand in hand. They view each other as essential to the other. It's not that the state, as it was before, looks at the private sector enterprise as something to be regulated, something to be controlled, like the policeman watching traffic. No, no, no. The state becomes a partner with the private sector monopoly, especially the monopoly, okay? Because the monopoly, by definition, controls the specific market. And so by way of its relationship with the monopolist, the state feels that it influences that particular market, you see? So this is what's happened with neoliberalism today, okay? I'm not saying about the theory of how it was implemented back in 1979, 1980, which, by the way, I personally think that it was necessary to implement neoliberalism at that time, but I think that neoliberalism had run its course and it was starting to cause damage, especially on the issue of unrestricted application of comparative advantage. Now, what is comparative advantage? It's very important to understand this concept. It's a subtle concept. Sometimes people don't quite get it, okay? So let me explain it to you in a way that's really simple. And if you guys understand it, you know, you can tune out for the next 3-5 minutes. But if you don't, it's really important that you understand comparative advantage. Comparative advantage is the cornerstone of neoliberalism, and it's the following idea. I'm not going to give you like the abstract of it. I'm gonna make it like so that you understand it. You're a lawyer, okay? You're a partner at a law firm, okay? And you get paid $1,000 an hour for your legal services. Hey, what can I say? You're a big shot, very successful lawyer at this law firm, right? You get paid $1,000 an hour. Now, one day it's like a Tuesday or something, right? And you realize that, holy cow, my lawn is really long. I mean, the grass is really tall. I should mow it, right? Now, comparative advantage says, should you mow it? And the answer is no, you should not. You should not mow the lawn. You should hire somebody else to mow it for you. Because the price of mowing the lawn is $15 an hour, but you get paid $1,000 an hour. See, so if you mow the lawn, you're going to save $15, right? Yeah, but you're going to lose that hour of labor. In a sense, you're going to lose $985. Yeah, because the idea here is that with comparative advantage, see, it is more worth your while to be working as a lawyer than to be mowing the lawn. Of course, you can do the lawn, no problem. And you could do it for free, which is, of course, cheaper than what the lawn boy, the gardener, whomever, will charge you, because he's going to charge you $15, but you can do it for free. Free is cheaper than $15. Simple as that. But cost of opportunity, that is, when you do one activity, that it means that you don't do the other activities, and the activity that you do is the price of all those other activities that you didn't do. Well, here you have the situation where it's to your advantage to not mow the lawn and to instead work as a lawyer, right? Yeah. But see, what happens is that there comes a situation where you're a lawyer, and you're earning $1,000 an hour, and say that there is some other service that is more expensive than yours. It doesn't really matter what it is, and it could be worth your while that you could do it, but by the same token, it's cheaper for you to hire the more expensive laborer than for you to do it. Because again, the loss of revenue is higher than the difference in price, okay? And so again, it's cheaper, it's better, comparative advantage, it's better for you to do one activity, to specialize in an activity. Comparative advantage is extremely important because it explains why specialization makes people wealthier, makes nations wealthier. Now, I've given a very simplified explanation of comparative advantage. Look into it in more detail if you're interested, okay? But by the same token, see, comparative advantage is the economic rationale for unrestricted migration. Because you see, the foreign migrants, they are cheap labor. That's what they are. And so they come to the Western democracies, not just, to sweep the floor, but also you have Indian software engineers who flood Silicon Valley and drive down the price of labor, see? Because you have a deregulated labor market and you're allowing people to flow from one place to another, free movement across borders. And what does this do? It depresses the price of labor in that particular country. And of course, this makes complete sense. See, if you have 100 people, right, and you are paying them $15 an hour for their labor, right? And because there are 100 jobs and there are 100 people, and so you pay them $15. That's a total of what? $1,500 an hour that you're paying in labor costs, right? But what happens if all of a sudden another 100 people show up? All of a sudden there's twice as much supply of labor as there was before. So you can pay half of what you were paying before and still get those 100 slots filled, see? Now, of course, what will happen is that, see, these immigrants who came over, these 100 immigrants that came over, they mix up with the native population. And see, some of the natives decide, yeah, I'll charge less for my labor. And some of the other natives say no. And some of the newcomers say, yes, I'll take whatever you give me. And some will say, no, I'll only accept $10 an hour or something like that. So, okay. But what happens is that with all this influx of people, all of a sudden the labor that before was was $15 an hour, they can charge now $7.50, or maybe even less, because a lot of times what happens with the mere threat of replacement, you can charge far less than half, because you would say, oh yeah, if there are twice as many laborers, you can charge half, but sometimes the exceedant labor distorts the market to an extent where you can just have the individual accept $5 an hour. Actually, it's Thomas Piketty who did a really interesting paper on that particular issue, but that's another story. But the point I'm trying to make is that, see, unrestricted immigration, deregulated labor markets, it's all an application of comparative advantage theory. And comparative advantage is a cornerstone of neoliberalism. You must understand it in order to understand the economics of neoliberalism. If you're not really interested in that, just want to get an overview of it like what I'm discussing here, then just take my word for it, okay? Okay, so these are basically the ideas of neoliberal economic theory. But the key issue that you have to understand is that it encourages private sector monopolies. It didn't start out with this. You got to keep this in mind, because in the 1970s, when neoliberalism was implemented, and at that time, a lot of companies were de facto monopolies being supported by the state. And neoliberalism at that time wanted to get the state out of private enterprise and privatize these companies and let the market decide whether the companies should survive or fail, which is a laudable goal. okay? But what happened was that the private sector adapted to this new situation, and by use of lobbying and state contracts, the private sector monopolies that emerged because of allowing the markets to do as they pleased, well, eventually these monopolies started working in tandem with the state to protect their position, and that's what happened, okay? So it's basically been like a long circle that's gone around, and we're sort of like back where we were back in 1970. The difference being is that in 1970, for instance, the company had been nationalized by the state, especially in the United Kingdom, for instance, and France. Whereas today, the company is held by the private sector. Its stock is traded on the stock exchange, but it has the same sort of relationship with the state. You see? Okay, so this is Leninism and this is neoliberalism, okay? Now let me go on to the next slide, which is going to be discussing neoliberal Leninism, okay? Now this is the meat and potatoes of the thing, and holy shit, I've gone 50 minutes and I still haven't gotten to the meat and potatoes of the goddamn webinar, but here we go. Okay, so what is neoliberal Leninism? First of all, it's corporate capitalism as the economic driver. Corporate capitalism is just another name I'm using for neoliberalism, what I described previously, okay? This corporatist capitalism, this monopolistic capitalism, is the economic driver, and this interconnectedness between the state and private enterprise. Now, the neoliberal Leninism has, just like Leninism of old, it has a system of unfalsifiable beliefs. Some of those beliefs are, for instance, the patriarchy. That is that everything is dominated by men, and men are privileged, and they abuse and treat women badly. Ooh, the patriarchy, and of course, we men know that that's bullshit because we've never been invited to meetings of the patriarchy, right? We never get to go to the clubhouse or anything like that. There is no fucking patriarchy, but it's an unfalsifiable belief. There's also systemic racism, which of course makes no sense whatsoever, because the term systemic racism, what does systemic racism mean? It means that in the system itself, it's racist. But see, if a system is racist, it would be in the statutes of the system. And do you see any law in the United States or the United Kingdom or France or Germany anywhere that says that it privileges white people over anybody else? No, you do not. Therefore, there is no such thing as systemic racism, okay? There isn't. It's just an unfalsifiable belief. To pursue the point insofar as systemic racism is concerned, the very fact that you cannot falsify it is a reason a lot of its adherents believe it's true, okay? Because they say, well, it's not there, but it is there, but therefore it's there. That doesn't make any fucking sense, but there you go. Another issue is, of course, white supremacy, intimately tied to racism. The belief that white supremacy is endemic, which, again, most people know that that's so much bullshit. White supremacy is exceedingly rare, and it's because most people have had to deal with black people and white people, and there are assholes of all races, okay? So, a white guy will meet some other white guy and consider him an asshole, and meet some black guy who seems all right, and so say, well, yeah, he's a black guy, but he's all right, and he's a white guy, he's an asshole. It doesn't work, okay? But again, it's an unfalsifiable belief. Climate change. Ooh, I'll tell you, I had a great experience with climate change one time. I was talking to somebody at a dinner, okay? And this woman, she went crazy on me. This was what I said. I said that the issue of climate change is debatable on many fronts, and there are many issues. It's not just simply climate change, right? And before I was able to explain what I was going to say, she went off on me. I swear to God, for a good 15 minutes. I'm not kidding. It was this monologue. The vitriol, the anger, the hatred, the rage. Holy shit. And I was like, yes, yes, yes. And I had to have a good relationship with this woman for professional reasons. So I sort of like, yeah. I sort of like just nodded along and, oh, you're absolutely right. The points I'd been trying to make were very simple, which was, number one, is there or is there not climate change going on right now? Number one, which is the obvious thing to check out. Number two, is this climate change caused by human activity? Yes or no? That's a second excellent point to debate, because it could be that the climate is indeed changing, and no, it has nothing to do with human activity, right? And number three, is this change necessarily bad? Which I think is personally the most important question of them all. Because of course, if the global warming is happening, you do realize it would be probably beneficial to the earth, because it would make a lot more land arable. That's something that people don't talk about, but it's absolutely true. Yeah, especially land in the northern hemisphere, in Canada and Russia. Yeah, if there was global warming, a lot more land in the Russian nation, which is enormous, yeah, and Canada would be arable. We would be able to plant more food, and the lands and the areas that would be destroyed by global warming and potentially the rise in the levels of the ocean. Well, first of all, a lot of those cities can be protected by way of dikes, as has happened in Holland, where I live, number one. And number two, in a lot of the places where global warming would render it, uninhabitable or not arable, well, they are already uninhabited or are not arable. So it wouldn't really change much. Global warming would actually probably be a good thing, but of course I was never able to bring up that particular point. And so, it's not an issue of logic, climate change, or the pursuit of equity, which is another thing that they have. They want to pursue equity, but notice it's among racial and ethnic groups, not individuals. Okay? And this is a key issue of the neoliberal Leninism. They want racial and ethnic groups to have the same outcomes, not individuals. It doesn't seem so at first, because they talk about equal outcomes, but they're not talking about individuals. They don't give a shit about individuals. They're talking about the ethnic and racial groups. Okay? And finally, of course, the old bugaboos of always: globalism, tolerance, and diversity. They are absolute goods. These are beliefs that are entrenched in the neoliberal Leninism. But of course, tolerance does not extend to those who disagree with any of these unfalsifiable beliefs. And like my little incident with that lady, this happened in a restaurant in Paris. It happened in 2012. I was having dinner in Paris. I lived there. And I was talking to somebody who was kind of like important to my career prospects at that time. And she freaked out. And I was really worried that it would render our relationship null and void, this issue of climate change. And my very mild, I mean, it really was mild critique of it. And I realized, of course, that, see, these neoliberal Leninists, they cannot tolerate any kind of deviation, okay? Because neoliberal Leninist elites, they identify one another by their adherence to these false beliefs, and identify their enemies as those who critique it, disagree with it, or reject it, okay? Just like a religion. All of these items, which you and I consider silly, they are not true, and they are demonstrably not true. But they don't see that, and in fact, if they were to see that, they would be ostracized from their social group. That's why they cannot allow themselves to see it. You understand? I mean, you understand how crucial it is. Think about it. Think about it. Think about these terms. You're Amish. You live in Pennsylvania in an Amish community. And you lived all your life with the Amish community. Your mom is Amish, your dad is Amish, your brothers and sisters are Amish, your wife is Amish, your kids are Amish, your best friends, they're all Amish. You hang out with just Amish people, right? And one day you get into your head that, God is just made up. There's no God. What do you think is going to happen? Everybody's going to reject you. Do you want that? Do you want to lose all your friends, all your loved ones? Maybe you won't lose them, like totally lose them, but they'll just, sort of like avoid you, handle you with kid gloves, like you're radioactive. Do you want that? Do you want to no longer be invited to hang out and have a good time with your friends, your family, your loved ones? Huh? Do you want that? Now, suppose you're living in New York City, right? your real family, you just graduated from college, right? You went to college in, I don't know, Illinois, just making something up. And your family lives in, I don't know, again, Kansas. And you're in New York City. You don't know anybody, but you have this circle of friends from work or whatnot, and they all think the same. Are you going to say that you don't agree with them and therefore lose these friends, especially when you're living in this large anonymous city and these are your only friends, the only people who might care about you? Mm-hmm. Are you going to disagree with them? Fuck no, of course not. Of course you're not going to disagree with them. You'd be insane to do so. And if they all have an idea that you kind of like think, oh, this is kind of stupid, what are you going to say? Are you going to say, oh, this is kind of stupid? No. You're going to say, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the patriarchy. Yeah, systemic racism, fucking white supremacy. Yeah, climate change. Oh, yeah. Greta Thunberg, she's so heroic. Yeah. Oh, yeah, equity. We got to get equity. Yeah, globalism is cool. Tolerance. Yeah. Tolerate anybody, trans and gays and, shit munchers, whatever they comes my way, I tolerate it. And diversity is our strength, man. Of course you're going to say that. Of course you're going to say that. What the fuck else are you going to say, huh? And wind up totally isolated, totally alone if you deviate? So you have to embrace this false ideology. And what happens? Well, you just go with it. You just go with it. You just go with it and just accept it. And if anybody says different, you ostracize them because you want to ostracize them before you get ostracized, right? You don't want people to realize that you don't believe in this shit. And so you say it and repeat it over and over until you eventually believe it. That's what's going on. It's very easy. Now, neoliberal Leninists have a very rigid hierarchy based on conformity to ideology, exactly like Leninists. And it has a hierarchic education system that is designed not to teach critical thinking, but conformity to the ideology, exactly like Leninist communists had a hierarchy, and how they weren't taught or learned critical thinking. They only learned conformity to the ideology. You see? See, you go to a university today and it has all these, gender equity bullshit classes and tolerance and diversity and all this crap. What's the point of that? If you learn critical thinking and apply your critical thinking to these unfalsifiable beliefs, they quickly fall apart. Look how I wanted to very mildly discuss the issue of climate change. I applied very basic and very simple critical thinking to the issue of climate change. I identified this very nebulous, or let me phrase it, I dissected this very nebulous phrase of like climate change is bad into its component parts, which were three, which was number one, is climate change actually happening? Number two, are humans responsible for this climate change and their activity? And number three, is climate change necessarily bad in the sense of global warming? I mean, we're talking really, when we talk about climate change, we're talking about global warming, okay? And I applied very basic critical thinking, and this woman had a shit fit. And this was not a stupid woman, by the way. This is a very educated woman. We were a very expensive restaurant, and she had a complete and utter shit fit over this issue. You see? See, it's not the issue of critical thinking. It's conformity to the ideology. And the education system is very hierarchic in neoliberal Leninism, what we are experiencing today. And you notice it because, like, say, for instance, they talk about the good schools and the safety schools. And you went to a good school and you got the right accreditation. It means that, did you learn to think critically? No, it meant that you are at a higher level of conformity. You see? Now, here's something else that's going on in this modern neoliberal Leninism, which is really fucking weird. And the source of it is kind of convoluted, but I'll explain in just a moment. The issue is that the neoliberal Leninists, they self-consciously identify the good of big corporations and the state with their own good. It's really fucking weird, but they think that what's good for General Motors and what's good for the federal government is good for them. And they will work for the good of General Motors, and they will work for the good of the federal government, which is insane if you think about it. They don't look at the big corporations and the state as adversaries. They look at big corporations as a good thing. And this is an outgrowth of neoliberal economic dogma, because neoliberal economic dogma, you got to keep in mind, in the 1970s, most people, most right-thinking people thought that corporations were bad, but it was neoliberalism that brought this notion that, you know, profits are good, companies are good because everybody makes more money and everybody's richer. And over the next 40 years, this notion that companies are good permeated the whole society and permeated these elites. And you got to keep in mind that all of these elites, they are striving to join the corporatist capitalist system. And so, of course, they see it as a good thing, you see? Because where the Leninists before viewed the state alone, not private enterprise, but the state as what was good, and they wanted to join the state and work for the state's benefit. In this current neoliberal Leninism that we're experiencing, they see private enterprise and the state, these big companies, these big organizations rather, as equally good. And they identify their own well-being with the well-being of the corporations and the state. It's trippy. Yeah. Now, neoliberal Leninists reject political populism because these Leninists, by definition, are elitist. They are hierarchical. And those who went to the right schools are better, higher up on the totem pole than those who did not, you see? And so they look at political populism as a bad thing by definition, okay? Any populism is bad. And, you know, it's not just right-wing populism. No, left-wing populism is equally bad because they're elitist. And it is necessary because they believe in an ideology, and by belief in this ideology, they are elevated. That's a key issue. Remember, Leninism is all about having a party that's a leading vanguard of society. The neoliberal Leninists of today, they are elitist. They want to be a part of that top tier group. It's not defined like the Leninist Bolsheviks. The Leninist Bolsheviks back in, you know, the 1917 and onward, they identified it with the Communist Party of Russia. That was the institution that they all wanted to join. Here today, it's nebulous, but the same impulse applies. They want to be a part of the in crowd. They want to be a part of that group, that elite group, and they don't want to be a part of the populists. And here's something else, that because of this, they only accept what an accredited member of the hierarchy tells them is acceptable. If some random Joe just applies his brain, his good judgment, his knowledge, his experience, and applies it to a problem and says, well, the answer to this is X, the neoliberal Leninist will reject it. They will only go with somebody who's accredited to the right schools, i.e. the right neoliberal organizations, the Harvard University or whatever, the Council on Economic Cooperation or whatever the fuck. You see what I'm saying? They will never trust an individual's independent judgment. They just won't. Even if it's right, especially if it's right. Because if the individual applying his own knowledge, or let me phrase it, if the individual applying his own judgment and widely held common knowledge that everybody agrees with arrives at conclusions that are different from the ideology, the neoliberal Leninist ideology, then that discredits the neoliberal Leninist ideology, right? So that can't be allowed. You can't have somebody with their own judgment and their own opinions. You can't. You have to shut them up. You see? You see the tragedy of it? They only go for somebody who's accredited. Thomas Piketty, who wrote The Capital, and whom I mentioned earlier, he is a guy who's become like a big wheel in economic circles, but because of his accreditation. Not really for what he's saying, just his accreditation. Yeah. And that goes on across the board. What somebody says objectively, it's not taken into account. It's only what accreditation he has, how he fits into the dominant ideology, the neoliberal Leninist ideology. You see? Now, of course, all of this ideology, just like communist ideology and the Leninist Bolsheviks, the neoliberal Leninists want prosperity and tolerance and diversity and globalism and all this bullshit, right? And so lies, distortion, deplatforming, and worse are acceptable in the fight against the enemies, such as populism. You see? Anything that destroys the enemy is good. And no matter how low it might be, no matter how immoral it might be, because the goal is so noble. You see? And it's a horrifying thing. But they see that the fight for equity, the fight against racism, the fight against the patriarchy are such obvious goods. The fight for globalism, the fight for tolerance, the fight for diversity, they are so obviously good that anything, no matter how underhanded or flat out evil, is acceptable in the pursuit of these aims. You see? You see how pernicious it is? And you're seeing it now in the election, how they're trying to steal it left, right, and center, right? Because, you know, Trump bad, populism bad. You see? See how it works? And the key issue, I misspelled there. Enemies are never engaged with. They are attacked and hopefully destroyed. See, that's the problem that we who oppose these fuckers don't get. Because we actually try to engage with these imbeciles. But they are never going to engage with us for several reasons. Number one, see, they realize that, if only at an unconscious level, that if they engage in an honest conversation and debate about their beliefs, they'll lose. They'll be shown that their ideas, their ideology is just a crock of shit. They know it because it is a crock of shit. It's a religion. Just as every Catholic, and I'm a Catholic, remember, every Catholic knows fundamentally that the story of the Eucharist is just a load of shit. Okay? No, there's no transubstantiation. You know, the host does not become the actual body and blood of Christ. No, it doesn't. Okay? But of course, it's a religion, and at this point, it's almost like a harmless superstition, and so we sort of like go along with it as Catholics, right? So it's not really that important, and we just like, okay, nod along. And most of the time, quite frankly, people nod along when somebody has some belief or some idea that is obviously not true, because we don't, you know, we don't want to make waves. We don't want to make life difficult for them or for ourselves. So we're like, okay, fine. They want to believe this stupidity, fine. Okay. But see, these neoliberal Leninists, right? They believe the patriarchy, systemic racism, and all the rest of it, climate change, and so forth. See, they cannot afford to have any conversation because they know it's stupid. Just as every Catholic fundamentally knows that transubstantiation, is fundamentally a crock of shit. We all know it. It's a crock of shit, right? But we don't really want to have a conversation with somebody who's going to rub our noses in it, because then it'll hurt our ability to interact with fellow Catholics who believe this nonsense. You see the problem. It's the same thing that's going on with neoliberal Leninists. They can't afford, for personal psychological reasons, to have an engaged conversation with somebody who disputes their unfalsifiable beliefs. Because once they really start applying critical judgment, they realize that it's a crock of shit and the whole mental edifice collapses. They can't afford that, see? And so you engaging with them, you're not going to convince them, okay? Because they don't want to be convinced. And they will never engage with you because they see your critique by definition as an attack. Just criticizing means that you are attacking their beliefs, dismissing their beliefs. And so you have to be just destroyed. You have to be attacked. There's no middle ground with these people. Remember, when somebody believes something that is irrational and that's not true, the more they believe this falsehood, the more rage and anger and hatred will flow from them against the person trying to show that they're wrong. It's human nature. Okay? If I believe that, that the body and blood of Christ becomes the host during the Mass becomes the actual body and blood of Christ, right? And I believe this fervently. I'm talking, really believe it. I believe it like, I believe that the sky is blue and the earth is round. That level of belief, right? If I really believe it and somebody contradicts me, I'm going to take my sword and try to chop them down like a good knight would, a good medieval knight would. Oh, wait, medieval knights did this. Yeah, they went to war over this shit. Yeah. And you see my point. The more you believe in something that is obviously not true, the more you're willing to fight for it and kill for it and die for it. See? And the more you believe in something that is obviously true, the more you are willing to just let somebody who's delusional just slide and ignore him. Think about it. Think about it. You're talking to me, and I say to you, hey, buddy, sky's green. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And you're like, no, the sky's blue, buddy. And, if you want, we can get like a spectrometer and just measure how blue it is. It's blue. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's fucking green. It's green, I tell you. And what are you going to do? You're going to be like, okay, fine. Because you know that the sky is green. Sky's green. Sky's blue, rather. See? You know it. I'm the delusional one who believes it's green. Are you gonna want to get into a fight with somebody who's obviously delusional? Fuck no. And that's what happens. That's what happens with the neoliberal Leninists. They believe something that is obviously not true. And we normal people listen to this shit and we're like, okay, fine, let him be deluded, But the problem is, of course, that these delusional half-wits become enough that they start changing our society. They start attacking us. They start trying to murder us. Or no, not trying to murder us outright, which they have done. They've shot people for wearing a Trump hat and murdered them in cold blood. This has happened. I'm not making this shit up. See? We've indulged these fucking morons, these fucking crazy people, because we know that they're wrong. It's obvious that they're wrong. Nobody in their right mind is going to be saying, oh yeah, this is actually true. No, we know it's bullshit. We know it's a lie. We know it's an insanity. And precisely because of that, we figure, just let them believe whatever idiocy they want to. Because that's, again, a part of human nature. See, the more you know something to be true, just completely know it, like the earth is round, the less you're willing to have a big fight about it. You'll just ignore the person saying that the earth is flat, And they're a fucking moron, flat earthers, right? You're going to have an argument with them? Fuck no. Why are you going to waste your time with a moron flat earther? You're going to say, okay, fine. Say that the earth is flat. But when enough people start believing this nonsense and they start teaching it to your kid, then it's a different story, right? Yeah, exactly. See? And by that time, it's too late a lot of times. By that time, so many people have been convinced that the earth is flat that they say that you're the crazy one and they're the sane ones. You see? You see what's going on? You understand the perniciousness of what's going on? Neoliberal Leninism is catastrophic for the Western democracies. This shit is, kind of like, it's catastrophic, full stop, okay? And this is going to cause a civil war because enough people, normal people like you and me, are going to be saying, no, come on. It was all good and fun and good and fine, rather, to have this insanity for a while now, for a little minority to have it. But no, we can't have it being taught to children. We can't have the whole society be run by these crazy people because they're crazy. This isn't real. This is not reality. It does not conform to reality. It has to be rejected. And well, if there aren't that many people who reject it, and it seems like the majority are with it, what the fuck do you think is going to happen? See? Polarization, political polarization that inevitably leads to conflict, armed conflict, violent conflict, murder, wars, that sort of conflict, civil war. That's what we're headed for. You have to understand what's going on. You have to understand that these people are nuts because they believe in an ideology that is not true, but you have to understand why they believe it. See? They believe it so that they can belong. That's the whole point. So that they can feel a part of something, so they can identify each other. They identify each other by their ideology and they find a friend. See, that's the key issue. Now, the way to deprogramming these people is if you can talk to them one-on-one and slowly, rationally start pointing out some of the issues, some of the inconsistencies of their ideology, and slowly, patiently be doing that, then you deprogram them. It's just like being a member of a cult. But the neoliberal Leninists, right? They don't realize that they're in a cult. They think that what they are discussing is reality. It's not. You see? You see how horrifying this is? And it's not easy to tell who's a neoliberal Leninist and who is not, because a lot of times people just say it to just get along and go along, and they don't really want to talk about it or think about it too much. They want to get through life with as minimal hassle as possible. That's the majority of people. But also, of course, there's no organization, there's no communist party that easily identifies those people who believe this shit. Some people believe it, some people don't. Some believe part of it because they don't realize that it's a whole entire package kind of thing. And some of them don't believe it at all, but are saying it to just get along. I know several people, executives in US corporations, who don't believe this shit at all, but they sort of like spew it out, because they can get by and nobody hassles them. That's what's going on. Anyway, you got to keep in mind that neoliberal Leninism is a serious threat to all of us, and we got to fight it. That's my thinking. So anyway, I'm going to throw open questions. Let me just pop open the question thingy. Oh, wait. Oh yeah, you were seeing the slide. Thank goodness. Oh man, thank God. I was like wondering if you had seen the slide or not, the second slide. Yeah, but you had. I was just checking. It would have been terrible if I'd given the whole spiel and you hadn't been watching the slide, but you did. I see there slide 2 of 2. Great. I am drinking cranberry juice, Ocean Spray cranberry juice, which I adore. Oh yeah, all that talking is thirsty work. Yes, I've seen Yuri Bezmenov. You should check him out. If you throw out a word, I have no idea what your question is. Trolley Spark says Monopoly. Don't know what you're asking. Jesus Guerra says, isn't it better to have fewer friends and acquaintances than to humor leftists and these cult members? That's what I personally do, quite frankly. I stopped trying to engage with these leftists and these cult members because they're fucking nuts. Yeah. Alexander CC says, I got no mic. You should get one. Comment on the Great Reset. Yeah, the Great Reset is part of this neoliberal Leninism. What's the first tenet of it? That you will own nothing and be happy. Fuck that. I'm happy when I own shit. When I don't own anything, I'm unhappy. So fuck you. That's what I think. I think the Great Reset is just I actually don't think it's that serious. Okay. I think a lot of people are going a little overboard, but it's just sort of like just a random thinking of some neoliberal Leninists. It's not particularly important. Okay. The battle is for the children. The battle is to make sure that they are actually taught critical thinking and not this stupid ideology. The battle is to make sure that Little boys who are rambunctious are not drugged out, and little girls who are insecure about their sexuality don't wind up being turned into transsexuals who have been sterilized and have their breasts removed. Okay. I mean, that's the real battleground. Okay. The Great Reset, it's just mental masturbation. Doesn't mean shit. Okay. It's funny. Okay. But don't take it seriously. Book recommendation, The Way of the Superior Man by David Data. I've never read that book or heard of it, to tell you the truth, so I can't comment, Charles. Trolley Spark says, this question, I understand monopoly is bad. No or fewer choices for the consumer. All big companies should be broken up. Absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the reason. It's fewer choices. Yeah. So what's your question? I'm happy to answer a question and happy to bring you on to ask it, but you have to ask me a question, not a statement. Let me see. Okay, Thomas Van Iperen. Van Iperen. Thomas Van Iperen. I'm going to pull you in. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Hang on. Just chill. Just be chill. Tell that bitch to chill. Who can recognize that movie? First one to recognize the movie I just quoted gets a gold star. Tell that bitch to chill. Chill, bitch, chill. Thomas, let me find you here and unmute you. Because Thomas is a pretty good question. Thomas, you there?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Pretty good, pretty good.
All
Yep.
right.
Sorry, it was Pulp Fiction. Jay Mill got it. It was, Samuel Jackson character when he talks to Honey Bunny, who's freaking out. So anyway, Thomas, what's on your mind, man? You had a good question. Please hit us up with it.
So, funny enough, I kind of stumbled into the education system and like problems in there when I was only like 13 years old in school at the time when I realized how much of a clusterfuck it is.
Yeah,
That sucked.
yeah, it is.
But
It is
so
a
how do
complete thing.
we, because with the way the education system is now, with how
Uh-huh.
liberal it is, everyone growing up and boys being neutered, getting put on drugs. I got put on drugs growing up. Like I spoke at like the high school I graduated from. They were doing like some career thing and they wanted me to come talk about like owning a business. And I
Uh-huh.
asked like how many of you guys want to work for yourself? And like one person out of the class of 30 put up their hand.
Yeah.
It's like they're all just being neutered.
Yep.
And how do we fix that?
Well, you can start by individually, insofar as your own kids are concerned, put them in private school and make sure that the teachers at the private school are not teaching any of this bullshit and make it absolutely clear that the kid gets no drugs whatsoever. No drugs, no medication, none of that shit. Okay. I'm talking about head medication, right? Of course, if the kid has some, some other malady, of course, give them medicine, okay? And if he needs antibiotics or whatever the fuck, sure. And I'm not anti-vaxxer, by the way. Polio vaccines and rubella and all the other vaccines I think are perfectly fine, and I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem is any kind of psych medication for a child, and they're basically trying to make the kid easier to manage because small children, boys, shit, they're a handful. Okay, I mean the little shits, they don't know when to quit. Okay, and it gets worse and worse as they get nearer to puberty, and that's normal. But of course, these teachers, they much rather say, oh, it's some malady, and therefore give them a drug, than deal with the fact that they've got, a rambunctious kid. And a lot of times, of course, the most rambunctious kids of them all are the ones who are going to be most socially productive down the line. But if you medicate that kid, you neuter him, you get what you describe, which is a room full of kids and only one of them wants to work for himself. This is a bad thing. And I think that the way you start is by, private education, and homeschool if that doesn't work. I mean, if you don't find a private school or you can't afford a private school, then just homeschool the kids and have your wife do it, or somehow figure out a way to do it. Because the education of your kids is the most important thing long term. You want to raise them right. You want them to have the right values, and to be critical thinkers. That's the key issue, to be able to think critically and have independent judgment, okay? And if you notice, none of them want to start their own business. What does that mean? They all want to depend on somebody else. They haven't been taught any kind of independence. And this is also a product of the way that the kids have been educated with helicopter parents, and also what's known as bulldozer parents, where the parent acts like a bulldozer and just clears the way for the kid. And so the kid never has to overcome obstacles. Sometimes with my own kids, I try to give them artificial obstacles just so that they can get over the obstacle, or encourage them to overcome some obstacle, you know, and just show them that, oh, that obstacle, no, you can get over it pretty easy. See, it's essential, but you see, mothers want to make the boo-boo go away. It's the responsibility of fathers to push the kid, okay? And in our society that has become more and more matriarchic, more and more mommified, okay? Yeah, that's becoming harder. See, so you have to start by yourself. So far as the whole society, I don't know. That's a good question, and I wish I had a simple answer, but I don't know.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Thomas. Thanks for being on. Let me see. The next question's here. Yeah, Jay Mill, by the way, that was Tell That Bitch to Chill. It was Pulp Fiction. Yeah. Let me get to Sebastian. Sebastian Mendo. He's got a good question about COVID. Sebastian, you there?
Hi, Coach. How's it going?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Dude, chilling, man. Yeah, so
thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this because in my gym, they currently implemented a new measure that is you cannot work out without a mask. And that just seems like a bunch of bullshit paranoia.
Okay.
Yeah. And I want to ask you, like, how does like the whole COVID scare relate to NNL?
Yeah, it's becoming part of their ideology, like the masks especially, and soon the vaccine. See, it's becoming it's an irrational part of their ideology, because also, you know, it's coming out that they've been doing studies about the fucking effectiveness of masks, and they don't work. There was just a study that came out yesterday about it that basically it doesn't do shit. Okay, it doesn't do shit to protect you from the illness around you. And it might quote unquote help if you actually have the disease in not spreading it around, maybe. But it certainly does not protect you if you enter an environment where the disease is aerosolized, you know, and you pick up the virus. It doesn't help you at all. Okay, so what the fuck? I think that it's just bullshit, but it's becoming part of this ideology. It's another part of the irrational ideology of these people. Okay, they don't care about facts. They don't care about rational analysis, much less independent judgment, you know? So it's just, I think it's a disaster. It's pretty fucking funny. But again, like I said at the end, this is the key issue. We who are sane look at this shit and find it funny that these people are so goddamn delusional. But the problem is that the delusional people are becoming the majority, and they are going to fuck up with our shit. And fuck us up and make us be as delusional as they are. That's the problem.
Yeah, and it's getting worse. Like in my university, for example, they just fired the dean of the.
Where are you, by the way? Don't tell me specifics, just like general city.
Vancouver, Canada. Yeah, so they just fired the dean of the law school in my university because he's transphobic, supposedly.
What did he do?
I don't know. He just had he just posted shit on Twitter, and a bunch of students made a letter asking for his resignation.
And he got fired.
Of course he did.
Jesus Christ. You know, what did he say in his tweet? That, you know, he didn't find trannies sexually attractive, ergo he has to get fired?
Probably. I don't know, man. No, and also like one of my clients, I also work with I do like consulting for tech, and I'm working with a doctor in California, and
Uh-huh.
this fucker believes all this cases shit, which is insane.
He believes what?
Like in like the COVID cases going up, we should lock down the world.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh God. It's just fucking insane. It's
A doctor.
he's a doctor. You know, of course, how am I not surprised? You know, I don't get it. I just, you know, the worst part is that, see, you guys know, I thought that this was fucking end of the world back in March. I thought this was a serious shit, right? And well, you know, not that many people died, and the ones who died were old. They had a lot of other problems, okay? And the thing that I thank God and that I truly am thankful is that it doesn't seem to affect any children at all. They just like skate through this shit. It's just another cold, and they kick it behind them, and that's that, right? Which is wonderful,
Mhm.
because remember the 1918 Spanish flu. It killed the majority of the people who died were between the ages of I believe it was 18 and 27 or something like that. Okay, it was young, healthy people. Those were the ones who died, which would have been tragic. But now, you know, no problem. It's older people, which is sad. It's a tragedy, all the rest of it. But you know, they live their lives. Okay, I mean, it would be a much greater tragedy if it were young people, if it were children, right? But you know, people aren't even looking at the reality. They're just going by. Uh, um, they're just panicked, and unfortunately, it's becoming part of their ideology. The COVID paranoia, the insistence on masks, the insistence on a vaccine when the vaccine becomes available. This is all part of this ideology, the neoliberal Leninists. And it's the way that they recognize one another. I want to insist on that. See? And you'll notice too with the COVID paranoiacs, they recognize each other by way of their mask. They look at you dirty if you don't wear a mask. Yeah. Even if you're doing something like working out, which, what the fuck, man? Working out with a mask? Are they high? Come on, right? But it's the way that they recognize each other. They need this, okay? And it's important to understand the need, because they feel alone. That's a key issue. These people, they feel so alone and so vulnerable. They cannot survive on their own. There are some people who can just survive on their own, who can make it just perfectly fine. But there are other people who need constant reassurance that they're doing the right thing. And those are the ones who are easily sucked into some cult or sucked into this political ideology, which is insane. See? It's an ideology that preys on people's fear of being alone. Understand that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just one last question.
Sure.
More about like your channel.
Okay.
I noticed
No,
you
I
had.
am not going to show the video of me running around naked and showing off my pot belly. Who do you think I am?
No, it's not that video. I was actually asking
Oh,
about
you
the
saw
video.
the video. Fuck, man. I put it up by accident, man. I should never have. God damn it. God, that stupid publish button. Fuck it. Okay. Well,
I
anyway,
know. Yeah.
what's your question?
Yeah. So you had a video that was, I think it was titled "Whom You Cannot Criticize," and I remember I saw it, and it seemed really insightful, and I wanted to share it with one of my buddies, but
Yeah.
I think you deleted it, and I was just curious why.
Well, because I might get into trouble. That's why.
Okay.
You know, it's simple as that. And so sometimes, you know, discretion is the better part of valor. Okay. And
Oh,
sometimes
okay.
it's all good and fine to be real clever and point something out,
Uh-huh.
but sometimes it's not so smart and it can get you into a lot of trouble. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Look,
Okay.
remember the story of the emperor's new clothes, right? The emperor
Uh-huh.
was fooled by some con men into buying a very expensive suit that was made of this very expensive material that could only be seen by very clever people. And everybody heard about this, and so they all said, "Oh yeah, this is incredibly beautiful material, and it's an incredibly beautiful suit." And the king is walking around, and there's this child who says, "Hey, why is that man walking around naked?" Hmm? Well, see, sometimes when you're that kid who points out, you know, why is that man walking around naked, you can get into a lot of trouble. And that's one of the things that I emphasize on my channel, because what I've noticed is on my channels here on Patreon, the caliber of people who follow my content is pretty good, pretty smart customers. Okay, I'm not blowing sunshine up anybody's ass. I'm just saying this objectively. They're not fools. A lot, because I see the comments. A lot of times they disagree with me, but the disagreements are on point. I mean, they make sense. Okay, so yeah, the people who are watching my content, they're not dummies. And sometimes, see, you can point something out that's true, and you can get into a lot of trouble, and you can get into a whole shit ton of trouble. And sometimes it's better to keep that knowledge to yourself. See?
Mm-hmm.
In that
Yeah.
particular video, I think that I sort of like overstepped my line insofar as my very own advice, which is sometimes you want to keep your fucking mouth shut, you know, because pointing something out, pointing out that the emperor has no clothes, it doesn't have any advantage to you a lot of times. See? And that's a hard lesson that when I was younger, I did not understand this. I would see things that were true, and I just like say, look, the emperor has no clothes, right? And it got me into a lot of trouble. And so as I gotten older, I realized it was a mistake. It's a mistake of smart people. Because a lot of times what happens is a smart guy will notice something that nobody else does, and he'll want to point it out. And that's where you can get into trouble, because either people don't realize it, and once they realize it, they don't like it, or they've always known it and they're just pretending. And you pointing it out makes their lie, their pretense, that much more obvious. See? See? So that's why sometimes you gotta know when to keep your mouth shut. Okay. And in that case, I did a video that I should have just not really made, just kept it to myself. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So Sebastian, great talking to you again, man. Great to have you on.
All right, thank you, Coach.
Oh, I want to tell you something. I'm gonna do this, by the way. Okay. I don't know when, because I have like a ton of shit to do, probably like in December or perhaps January. But this is gonna make you laugh, but okay. I set up an OnlyFans, like on OnlyFans, you know, the porn, you know, thing. Yeah, and I'm gonna put content on it. Okay, I think I'm gonna put the same Patreon content at, and by the way, I'm gonna put it at a higher price point on OnlyFans. Okay, I think I'm gonna charge like, you know, $10 for the extra video a week, and like $30 for the for the webinar. It's something I'm toying with. Okay. And if you think it's a good idea, I'll do an instant poll. You think it's a good idea? Raise your hand. The only reason I'm doing it is because there are going to be a lot of guys on OnlyFans who might like my content, and I know a lot of people on YouTube who do have OnlyFans and don't do Patreon. So if you say that it's a good idea, let me put everybody's hand down, and let me ask those who think it's a bad idea. Who thinks it's a bad idea? Raise your hand if you think it's a bad idea to put an OnlyFans. Like sincerely, okay? If you sincerely think it's a bad idea, not like, I don't know. Okay, there are a few people. Okay, I'm gonna ask Stephen Pace here. Stephen, why do you think it's a bad idea? Hello? Hey, Stephen.
I think it's hey, I'm here. I think it's a bad idea because, I mean, I think the price point right now for what you're delivering, I think it's good. It's like all around. Like,
no. Sorry. Let me explain about the price issue. The Patreon prices would not change. This would be only for OnlyFans that I would charge double. Okay, just to see if it would work, you know, because I mean these morons, they're throwing money at these thoughts, and I'm figuring, well, they might as well throw money my way, you know. And I'm kind of curious, but you think it's a bad idea to raise the price on OnlyFans? Tell me why.
well, now that you give it that context, if you're just gonna do it just to like fuck around and see what happens, then I don't think it's a problem. I thought you were talking like more seriously. I was like, why? Like, what the fuck? What was the point? So, but if you're just doing it to fuck around, then I guess, yeah, go for it. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to make it really clear, okay, that they would have access to Patreon content, but it would be at the exact same price point as, or greater than you guys, okay? Because, like, I posted that message the other day, that somebody really nice asked me to, if it would be okay for him to download a webinar and post some of the content on a video that he was going to make. And it was really flattering because he found it very insightful and he wanted to share it with other people. But I told him no, that I wouldn't give him permission.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, because this is content that I do exclusively for Patreon supporters. And I've always felt that the relationship is transactional in the best sense, okay? In the sense that you guys are paying. You're paying your hard-earned money. And I'm delivering a product consistently that you're not going to get anywhere else, okay? And that's very important to me because that way it's like an honest trade, you know? You pays your money and you get your content, and it's like and it's the best content I can make, and it's, you know, I do it honestly. I'm not trying to fool anybody or anything like that. And I don't like to say, oh, please give me a tip, because it just seems like charity and it doesn't feel particularly honest. Whereas doing an extra video and doing the webinars, that feels like I'm doing something. I'm working for people's support. Okay, I want to make that really clear.
And I feel like $10 a month is right where it should be.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that is a fair price, you know, and it's not something like egregious or anything like that. But on OnlyFans, you know, I'm just sort of like, you know, I've been sort of like exploring that thing, man. And I haven't made become a member of any one of these thoughts, right? I just want to make it clear. I'm like, how the fuck, you know, what's going on? And I saw this
but if they did purchase it, wouldn't they eventually just be like, why am I paying this when I can just join Patreon for a third of the price?
Good point. But I'm also thinking that a lot of these guys are on OnlyFans. I don't know. Okay, I'll have to think about the pricing. Okay, but of doing OnlyFans, I think it would be goddamn funny. You know? Oh yeah. Yeah, and you guys would get jealous because, you know, I'd start like posting, you know, pictures of my pot belly and my double chin. Yeah, and you'd be like, you know, you're not giving us those content on Patreon, man. You're like prioritizing OnlyFans with those pictures of you naked. We want them too. Yeah, I know you fuckers would say that. But anyway, you think it's an okay idea? Okay, I'll think about it some more. How have you been, by the way?
I've been good, man. I got a couple questions.
Shoot.
Yeah, so like, if we can't engage in meaningful debate or conversation with these lefty like nut jobs, and we can't, like, our personal and our financial life, like, we can't allow ourselves to get branded with like a scarlet letter, like, how do we resist? I mean, I don't see...
Let me rephrase or fine tune my thinking on how to deal with these people. If you can like talk to them one-on-one reasonably and sort of like reasonably make your critiques understood by them, that they acknowledge that what you're saying is not out of line, then you might have a chance. Okay. Because I mean, for instance, like the populism that's going on. Why is this populism happening in the United States, for instance, and a lot of Western Europe? It's because a lot of the jobs were outsourced. You know, they were the factory jobs were sent to Mexico and China and whatnot. And a lot of people in these countries, in the United States and the Western democracies, low-skilled jobs, they're out of work. They're out of work and they're depressed, and they want somebody who represents their grievances because they have legitimate grievances. Okay, and a lot of the leftists dismiss this, but if you can talk to a leftist and say, look, these guys have legitimate grievances. I mean, they don't have work, or they have all these immigrants who are coming in and lowballing them, and all of a sudden they can't afford to feed their families or whatnot, right? It's not fair, is it? And they respond to that, and you can talk to them and have a civil conversation. And most important of all, it seems to me, if you can get the leftist to recognize that the grievances of the other side, quote unquote, of our side, have some merit, then maybe you can get something with them, get somewhere with them rather. But if they sort of like just shut down and just a brick wall, it's pointless. They don't want to be convinced because they need to believe in their ideology. And you as an individual dealing with these people are going to have to figure out that point.
Yeah, I got kind of a funny story about that. There's this there's this chick I knew through work, and she became like really, really interested in the midterm elections that just occurred 2 years ago in the United States, and she was hoping that the Democrats can retake the House and all this stuff. And then I was talking to her about, you know, differences between the left and the right and conservative ideas and stuff like that. And then when the Democrats did retake the House, she sent me a text. She was like, my faith in democracy has been restored. And I just pointed out the fact, I said that, well, the fact that you only have faith in democracy when your side wins shows that you actually have no faith in democracy at all. And that kind of, it caused like a non sequitur, like she couldn't handle that I pointed out an inherent contradiction in her own position. And it's just like when you have those little moments like that, it's funny as hell to see the look on these people's faces when you point out that their position and their ideology is like self-contradicting and it's actually a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
funny actually.
Yeah, it is. And that's why, you know, you come to the conclusion that most of them are kind of stupid on the one hand.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you start to think to yourself, well, maybe the people who are leading these morons aren't stupid, but just cynical. You know, just fucking evil because they know that it's bullshit. You know?
Yeah. Another thing going along with what that guy pointed out from Vancouver, where the dean or whatever had to resign because he said something. A lot of these American corporate companies, they're pushing this leftist ideology and
Oh, yeah.
this grievance culture, and everything is racist or prejudiced or whatever. And at a major company in the United States, there was a C-suite executive who served in the Navy, and 30 years ago, when he was like a low-level officer in the Navy, he wrote some opinion article that it was basically agreeing with the government policy at the time that women should not serve in direct combat roles in the
Uh-huh.
military.
Uh-huh.
Which this was written 30 years ago, and this person got canceled for it 30 years later. He said, oh, you didn't support women's equality, so now we have to let you go. And it was just, it was funny
They
as hell to
fired
watch.
him?
But yeah,
They
yeah, well,
fired him?
he
Damn.
was forced to resign. And I was reading access to like a commentary where people could comment on this article, and the vast majority of people, there was all the comments in there were in defense of the guy. They were all saying this was written 30 years ago when he was agreeing with a policy of the government that was actually government policy at the time. Like, this is wrong to basically destroy someone for an opinion that they held 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gave me hope, where I think that just because the left right now is the loudest and screaming and making the most noise and causing the most chaos, I don't believe that they're in the majority yet. But everyone else is silenced because they know if they speak out against it, they get shamed in, you know, these struggle sessions, and they get branded. So it's a very weird, very awkward, weird time that we're living in.
Extremely. It's extremely weird and awkward and just cringe inducing. And that's the thing. See, like I said at the end of it, and to tell you the truth, I'm realizing that is probably the most profound insight of them all. See, the people who are sane and who recognize the obvious truth, they just tell the crazies, okay, fine, have it your way, because they figure, why bother arguing with a crazy man? But the crazies are expanding, you know, and we who are silent, we have to start arguing and saying, no, this is wrong. We have to stand up and say, no, this is wrong, and we can't put up with it. Like this Navy guy that you're saying, well, he's not even a Navy guy, he's a executive who's retired from the Navy, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fucking wrong, you know? And on top of that, see, I think that there are a lot of people today who would think that no, women should not serve in combat units. I personally don't think that they should. They don't have the upper body strength to be in combat units and potentially cause a weakness in the combat unit itself.
Well, I feel differently. I feel if they can meet the same physical requirements, then they should be able to serve. But the thing is, I know women in the military that agree with your point of view that say no, women should not be in direct combat roles in the
Yeah.
military. But if anyone that expresses that, even though I disagree with that, I believe women should be able to serve in any role as long as they can meet the requirements that are established for whatever role they're in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's and
Well,
we talked about this.
You and
Go
I
ahead.
are having this argument about it right now, right? And how are we arguing this issue? You present your point of view, I present my point of view. I disagree with it. Well, if I would disagree with you, and you disagree with me, but so what? See,
Yeah,
we
but you
don't think
can't.
you can't argue with these people.
Yeah,
What?
exactly. You can't engage in any sort of civil discussion with
Yeah.
these people, and like you've seen it all over on YouTube, like these debates or these lectures given at these college campuses where the lefties come in and just cause complete chaos and just try to just cause so much disruption they shut it down. Like the shit is wrong. Like free speech.
Fucking A wrong. Yeah.
The people that claim that they're tolerant are and for freedom and shit, they do not agree with the most fundamental freedom of speech.
Well, no,
Just
that's the
because they
point.
don't agree with it.
They talk about tolerance, but it's only the right kind of tolerance, the tolerance that they like. Remember, hate speech is the speech that they disagree with. It's not
Yeah.
complicated, you know? It's like, like me saying, oh, you think that women should serve in the military? That's hate speech. Yeah. Where do you go from there? But that's what they're basically doing. I fucking hate these people. Oh, yeah. But anyway, look, it's great talking to you, but there are a lot of people I wanna touch base with. But thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
Later.
And talk to you soon. Let me get to Philippe L. Philippe L. He's got a question here that's not directly related to the topic, but it's pretty fucking funny that we should discuss. Philip, are you there? Hello. Philip is not there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there he is. Hello.
Hello, coach.
How's it going?
It's fine. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. You got a really good question. Hit us.
Yeah, so what do you think of Andrew Coleman getting an Emmy Award?
Stunning and brave. Stunning and brave. What the fuck? If for those of you who don't know, Andrew Cuomo is going to get like some sort of honorary Emmy for his COVID announcements on TV. Okay, the Emmy Awards, if you don't know, they're awards given to people for their television work. Okay, and there are different kinds of Emmys. There are local Emmys, there are national Emmys, there are Emmys for the news programs, there are Emmys for dramatic TV shows and TV movies and all the rest of it. Now, this Emmy that they're going to give is like a special Emmy that they've never given to anybody before because of his public service announcements insofar as COVID is concerned. Andrew Cuomo is the guy who caused more deaths in New York, in the state of New York, than anybody else, because he ordered that people infected with COVID be basically locked in with elderly people. And so COVID went rampant and riot through a lot of old folks' homes, which is just fucking nuts. And a lot of old people died. And a lot of these old people died and were not able to be comforted by their families because these older people were quarantined from the younger, healthy people, which is a tragedy. I mean, think that you're an old person, you're dying, and you can't even talk or see the people who love you and whom you love, and to die alone like that. I mean, how horrible. And this fucker is getting an Emmy. That's peak clown world as far as I'm concerned. Philip, what do you think?
Yeah, it's insane. Didn't he write a book also?
Oh
Midst
yeah,
of Corona?
he's trying to make money off this thing. You know, it's yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty goddamn funny. Yeah. What do you think of this presentation of neoliberal Leninism, by the way?
Well, I like it because I've been studying a lot of, say, communism and Solzhenitsyn and try to understand all this crazy thing going on. And I think this pretty much nails the head.
Yeah, it's something I'm still working on. I still have to work on aspects of it and just get it better. But it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. And These are communists. You got to
One
understand
thing
they're fucking communists. Hmm?
Yeah, one thing I think is confusing for me at least is like, as you said before, the communists, they had a party, but this is not really tied. This is more like the globalist elites that are more tied. Like, for instance, this Davos guy
Yeah.
who started
Yeah.
Davos, he was comparing everyone to have this digital biological reset and everything you talked
Yeah.
about. So it's sort of like confusing.
Yeah, there isn't like one organization that they're all a member of. It's all just loose organizations. It's the people who watch TED Talks. It's the people who pay attention to Davos and actually go to Davos. But it's also people at lower levels. It's sort of like spread out and diffused. It's not centralized in a party like the Leninist Bolsheviks that had the Communist Party. And so it's hard to tie them in. What would be useful is to somehow create a party for them to go to so that we would know, we could identify them. But at this time, there is no such thing. Do I think that such a party might emerge? Maybe, but right now it doesn't seem necessary. One could argue that the Democratic Party is in essence these people. I don't know. So yeah,
No, I think in Europe they're very easy to spot because those are the people that want to go for like the European Union and then like a super state and have all them combined. So those are very easy to spot, at least in Europe.
Yeah, well, what happened was that, see, the European Union project, see, there was a time that people on the right were all in favor of it and thought it was a good idea. It's only recently developed into this thing that is not such a good idea. So things are still moving and they're flowing. And you got to keep in mind also, when people look back on history, they tend to tidy things up and put everything in neat categories that at the time were a lot more diffused and harder to spot. Okay, a lot of times people sort of like tidied up. Imagine it's sort of like with a broom, everybody pushes the dust closer into little piles, because the dust is like spread out all over the place. But you go to the room like a historian, you tidy things up and you make nice little neat little piles of dust, one here, one over there. You see what I mean? And history tends to be like that. Historians tend to be like that, not in any kind of malicious way, but they just try to simplify things. But when you're in the middle of the process, it's harder to delineate stuff, you see? And so I think that's the effort I'm trying to make, is to delineate a class of people, because that's what it seems to me that we're seeing as we're traversing this epoch.
Yeah, it's very helpful with these presentations. Just one final thought. What are your thoughts on the China, what do you call it? No, the Asia trade deal that went in just a couple of days ago, like in November?
I heard of it. I haven't been able to look at it in any kind of detail because I've been like busy with a lot of personal stuff, like the move and all the rest of it. But as I understand it, India is not part of this deal, is it?
I'm not really close with the details, but I think maybe not. Let me check.
Yeah, I think that's indicative of something, because India and China have had, they've had some friction. India is going to be passing China in terms of population. India speaks English. So there might be issues there. And the fact that India is not a part of this is really interesting, okay? That the other countries are a part of this free trade agreement, to tell you the honest truth, I don't follow Asian politics that closely, but I would have thought that there was an Asian free trade agreement of some sort from before. I'm surprised it's taken them this long to set it up.
Yeah, but what I understood, this really benefit China, and for like the Biden campaign, they really want to keep trade with China. So this is also this neoliberal push to have like China and this global elites keep trading and having it beneficial.
Well, yeah, they want to keep on trading, yeah. But I'll have to look at it. I mean, honestly, anything I say about it, I'd be just talking out of my ass. So I'd have to look at it.
Okay.
That'll be a while at this point. Yeah. But anyway, great talking to you, man.
Great talking to you. All well.
Good to hear. Take it easy. See you next week.
See you.
Let me see. Let me go to a next question. Eve Infante. Let me see. Eve Infante. Hello. Hello, Eve.
Hello.
Oh, you're a woman. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes, I just joined, and no worries. I agree with everything everyone's saying. I am not here to disagree.
Oh no, it's
Um,
disagreement is fun. That's disagreement is not the problem. It's
well,
intransigence.
judge, I
And
mean.
yeah, no. I mean, disagreeing and that's perfectly fine. It's not listening to the other person's argument. That's the problem. So anyway, what's on your mind?
So my question is, I've become more I'm sorry, no, I've become more conservative. I'm very conservative now, and I've lost a lot of friends and like even family members because of my ideas. Especially with women with the whole abortion issue, it's like they look at me like I'm a murderer because I believe abortion is murder. And it's kind of isolating because I live in New York, so I don't know how to meet other people that are conservative because I used to be very liberal, which was horrible. That's why I agree with everything everyone's saying, because when I was liberal, I was miserable. I wasn't a happy person, and the more conservative I became, like I'm just more peaceful now. And it's like my liberal counterpart friends, well, former friends, just they don't get it, and it's very sad. It's very sad just to see people go against like just nature, their natural state, but I can't do anything about it. So I just wanted to ask you, how can I find a group that will, I guess, accept me, because it's very isolating to be a
How old are
conservative
you?
in New York. 27.
And I mean, you have a job in New York and you're working there. I assume New York City.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Uh, that's going to be a tough road to hoe. As simple as that. Because to tell you the truth, I mean, I lived in Manhattan, so I lived there for what, 3 years, 4 years. So I know more or less the scene, and I know that since I lived there, it's become a hell of a lot more politicized.
Yes.
So it's going to be really tough. It's simple as that. Probably social media and probably gravitate to activities that attract conservative people. You know, one activity that you should check out. Have you ever played the card game Bridge?
No.
Well, you should check it out. And there are a lot of bridge
Bridge.
clubs in New York City, and it tends to be very conservative people. Okay.
Okay, let me write
Uh,
this down.
yeah, it might be older people, and this is advice to anybody in any city. That bridge clubs are. It's an it's a game for older people. It's a card game. It's a hell of a lot of fun. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that because I used to play bridge pretty heavily in Chile a few years ago, and I just, for various reasons, I started getting into it again. And so, yeah, and I started thinking about it, like, because you have to do a lot of strategy thinking in bridge. It's shitloads of fun. Okay. It's actually Bill Gates
Okay.
and Warren Buffett's favorite game. That's how they become friends, as a matter of fact, by playing bridge. But anyway, older people who are more conservative tend to go there. Okay. Um,
Okay.
and yeah, now as to young people, you'd have to like check out a lot of Facebook pages and stuff like that. You do have to keep in mind that a lot of right-wing groups are heavily guys, and a lot of them don't like women around because they've been fucked over by women. Okay. They've been fucked over and they feel that the society as a whole prioritizes women over men. Uh, and that is an observable reality. A lot of times guys are treated kind of like shit and women are sort of like put on pedestals. And so because of that, a lot of guys who are more conservative tend to look askance at women, and they're
Mhm.
not really crazy to deal with them. Okay. So you have to
No,
keep that in mind.
I completely agree, and I kind of get it both ends, because I do agree with that men do get the shorter end of the stick. So I feel like women don't like me as much. Like a lot of women like to dominate men, and because I don't like that, it's so I get it on both ends. Like men don't want me around because of
Yeah.
men don't want me around because of the whole women thing, and then women don't want me around because I don't necessarily agree with the whole notion. Like it's crazy, because when women speak with women, they like talk about men in not the nicest way, and they think that they're smarter than men, and like I don't agree with that. So that's
Uh-huh.
why I find it ridiculous when women get offended when men speak the way they do. So I totally get it. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand. Yeah, and look, it's not an enviable position that you have. What industry are you involved in? Just
I am
generalities.
I'm in broadcast news. I'm
Oh God.
specifically in ad sales. I do ad sales operations for Fox News, which that was one of the main, that was the start of me losing a lot of people.
Okay.
But I'm trying to get into news reporting. So I
Yeah.
went,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
that's a dying industry. I mean, I
yeah,
wouldn't recommend it, to tell you the truth. No,
yeah.
it's a
I was
dying
actually
industry. It
thinking
really
of
is.
leaving school because not
Oh,
only
you're in
is it too,
school?
yeah, because it was a whole thing, the president of Fox went to this one school, so I was like, I was advised by HR to go to that school just because he helps people out there go to that school, but uh, it's just very liberal, it's very uncomfortable, and I just don't see why I have to pay so much money to just be uncomfortable. So I was thinking of
Yeah.
just
Well,
leaving.
the key issue here is that don't look at it like it's liberal.
Yeah,
That's not the problem. The problem is that it's divorced from reality. That's the issue. Okay.
yeah,
I mean, when they're talking about shit, it's not that it's liberal or conservative. There are lots of liberal points of view that are perfectly legitimate and valid. That's not the issue. It's that the ideology is divorced from reality. Okay. Now, insofar as your
yeah,
situation, like I said before, it's going to be an incredibly tough road to hoe. Okay. So you're just going to have to, you know, the smart thing would be perhaps leave New York City altogether and go to a smaller city where you can be happier, where you can meet people who are pretty mellow and that they're not so politicized. New York is extremely politicized also because you see people there, they feel so alone and isolated. So they all coalesce around a shared ideology. It's like when people coalesce around a shared interest or a religion or some sort, and so they feed into each other, and anybody who steps out of line, they get kicked out of the group, and that's has happened and is happening to you now. So you got to
yeah.
understand your situation, and if you want to continue living that kind of life, see. So yeah.
What do you think of Florida? I was thinking of moving there.
Yeah, I personally have been looking at the town of Abilene, Texas. That
Abilene.
seems like a really nice place. Not Austin, Abilene. It's small, 120,000 inhabitants. Very nice, good place for kids, nice church-going folk. Yeah, it seems very nice. Anyway, Eve, it's great talking to you, and I hope to see you next week.
Will do, sir. Thank you for answering my question.
No problem. Take it easy. Let me see here. Oh, this is a good one. Let me get to Charlie. Charlie Meek or Meeky? I'll ask him. Charles. Charles, are you there?
Yeah, hey, coach.
How's it going? Is it Meek or Meeky?
Charles Meek.
Meek.
Sorry, that's not even my real name. That's just the name I use for
Okay, well,
stuff.
I didn't want to be rude to your fake
No,
name,
it's fine.
so yeah.
Well, it's because my real name is even harder because I'm Indian. So.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. No, I mean, I have no problem with somebody using a pseudonym. Look, I'm not interested in anybody's like real information. I'm not interested in doxing anybody, and this is not just to you, but to everybody here listening. If I ever ask you, what job you have or what industry, just give me as general as you want to. Okay, I'm not interested in like the specifics. I'm interested in the generality to know where you're coming from, or perhaps what city you're located, what region, that kind of thing. I'm not interested in doxing anybody or making anybody's life miserable or uncomfortable or anything like that. Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make that clear. So anyway,
Alright.
what's on you? You had a really good question here. Let me I have it highlighted here. So hit us with it.
Yeah. So, I'm in like a university where like almost everyone is liberal, obviously, but like my sister, she's really bad. Like one time I remember her saying like, I'm 18 right now.
And she is
21.
okay.
But I remember one time she was like, "You can't be sexist against men or racist against white people." And like, I'm not even white, but like, that's so ridiculous to me. The idea of that.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with that? Because that's obviously just not true.
Ask simple questions. Okay. Simple questions that go to the definitions of things. For instance, ask her, what is racism? And
Yeah.
most people can't define racism, by the way, you'll notice.
Mhm.
Let me phrase it. Most people cannot define a word if you hit them with it on the spot, okay? Because it's actually hard, because that's the whole point of a word. It's a shorthand for a particular concept. And to stop and think, okay, how do I define this? It's actually a lot of mental activity, and it throws people. And by the way, if you want to fuck with somebody, you know, ask them to define some word while you're arguing with them, and you'll see how they get thrown totally, okay?
Mhm.
I've had it happen to me. I've done it to other people, believe me. When somebody asks you to define a word, it throws them. So
Mhm.
ask them to define racism, and of course you supply the definition, which is to be prejudiced against someone because they belong to a racial group.
Mhm.
That's what it means, right?
But like, I think I don't entirely remember. I think I might have said that, and she said the whole like you need to have power argument, and that's like so ridiculous.
No, you just say that that's not true.
Yeah.
Because it's not. Okay, that's not racism. Okay,
Mhm.
that's a power imbalance, but it's not racism. And see,
Yeah, I even remember one time like back when the Black Lives Matter riots were originally occurring, like we had some family friends over and like all the parents were talking about it, and like all the children who are like young adults now were also talking about it, and like all of the other kids basically were like on the side of Black Lives Matter, and then all the adults were like, no, there's like not obviously the black people aren't being persecuted in America.
Mhm.
And then like and I remember one of my parents' friends was like, okay, you know what, whoever like wanted to get to you, they like brainwash you, they obviously got you. And they got so upset, they're like, what, we're the ones who are brainwashed. And it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it can get pretty heated. Okay, so what you have to do is go down to definitions and go down to basic facts.
Mhm.
Like for instance, there's this great factoid about, you know, there are like 300 million interact in the U.S. There were 300 million interactions between police officers and people, just civilians, right? And you know, less than like 1,000 shootings of
Mhm.
people by police, and of those, you know, 14 were of unarmed black people. So
Mhm.
14 people out of 300 million interactions, which is microscopic. It's nothing. Okay.
Mhm.
Ask them the question, because like for instance, in Europe, I've asked many people, you know, well, how many black people do you think have been killed by the cops? And they'll say like 2,000 or 5,000 a year. And when I say, no, it was 14 last year, they're like, no, you're lying. And I'm like, no. Well, no, they don't say that. They're polite enough not to say that. But I tell them no, and you can look it up. It's in the Washington Post of all places. It was only 14.
Mhm.
Ask them that. I mean, question their basic assumptions is basically what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Okay, and do it gently with the people that
Yeah.
you care about, the people you love, because you're talking about your sister. Okay, and you
Yeah.
want to have a relationship with your sister, I
Yeah,
assume.
of course.
Right?
I
So
do
you have to
already,
be,
but like,
yeah, you have to be gentle about it, and you have to be it in a way that's not confrontational. And this is a problem for us guys, because when we know that we're right about something, we tend to push it and be very confrontational, and people feel that they are, you know, backed into a corner up against a wall kind of thing, because
Mhm.
nobody likes it when it's shown that they're wrong. Nobody.
Mhm.
It's a very rare guy who doesn't have a problem. In my own personal case, what happened was that I really don't have much of a problem when people tell me that I'm wrong, or let me phrase it, when they show me that I'm wrong. Okay, when they
Mhm.
just tell me that I'm wrong, I say, fuck off. But when they show me that I'm wrong, with data, with facts, with the truth or a strong argument or whatever,
Mhm.
I don't have a problem with it, because when I was growing up, I studied math. I was very heavily into math, and in math, there's only one correct answer, and so, or a finite set of correct answers for any given problem, right? And so
Mhm.
because of that, you either got the correct answer or you didn't get the correct answer. And so
Mhm.
because of that, I became very adept at thinking, oh, well, you know, I didn't get the correct answer, so I was wrong. So this is the correct way to approach it, and that's the correct answer, and that's that. And I got very
Mhm.
used to it. I didn't take it like a blow to my ego. But most people do. And you have to
Mhm.
understand that. That's why you have to be gentle, especially with the people you care about. And the
Mhm.
best way is to focus on the basic assumptions, okay? And when you show them that they're wrong, don't crow about it.
Mhm.
Make it clear that you're not trying to make them feel bad about themselves, you know?
Okay.
And this is especially true about sibling relationships, because, you know, growing up with a brother or sister, right? I mean, you play some game together and you win and you shove their face in it, you know, I won, you lost, ha ha ha, right? Which is normal. But you cannot allow that dynamic to emerge when you're talking about this kind of political stuff. And you cannot allow the person to feel alienated, you know, because it'll be horrible, and you know, you'll alienate them and you'll lose a valuable relationship in your life. See what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah. I hope this helped, man, because
Yeah.
it's,
Okay. Thank you.
I'm betting that a lot of people are having this exact same problem. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it and have
Mhm.
you ask the question. Yeah.
Okay. Well, before I go, I had like another question that I just wanted to ask about. Like, so you say a lot of stuff that's obviously controversial. How do you like be confident in yourself that you're not like being misogynistic when you say this stuff?
Well, because I know that I love women. Okay.
Mhm.
I enjoy their company. Okay. I
Yeah.
much prefer a women's company than to men's company, to tell you the truth. You
Mhm.
know, no offense, but
Yeah.
like, I just like women. I find them really interesting. I find them so surprising because their
Mhm.
priorities are so radically different from men's priorities. And so with
Mhm.
men, I can usually sort of like anticipate what they're going to say when I'm having a conversation with them. I mean, not immediately, of course, but after a while, I get a sense of, oh, we're going to be talking about this or that subject, and it's going to go in this or that direction, right? But with a
Mhm.
woman, you never know. It's like, you know, it's like a pinball, in conversationally speaking. And so it's a lot of fun
Mhm.
for me. I find it interesting. And I like women. I like their company. I think that they're adorable, and you know, apart from the sex issue, I like them. Okay, there are men
Mhm.
who don't like women. Okay, it's not that they're gay. They're straight as an arrow, and they want to have sex with women, as many as possible, but they don't like the company of women. Okay, um,
Mhm.
there are some guys who are just like that, and there are other guys who like the company of women. Okay, I just there are lots of women that I have no sexual interest in whatsoever, whose company I enjoy tremendously. You know, and I
Mhm.
can have a woman friend. Sometimes it's been a problem because, see, I thought of them as friends and they thought of me as a potential mate, and
Mhm.
you know, they got the wrong idea. And when they realized it, they were pissed because they thought that they'd invested all this time in a future boyfriend, and I was thinking, oh, we're just hanging out and having a great time like a couple of friends. Okay, so
Mhm.
if somebody says that I'm a misogynist, I just laugh it off. I just ignore it.
No.
Also,
Yeah, because I saw your video about like you can never be friends with a woman, and that kind of like made me think, don't try to be friends with a woman at first. But then I realized, no, you can try, but like eventually that's where it'll lead to sex.
well, no, what happens is no, it's not that you'll want to have sex with her. It's that in any
Mhm.
relationship between a man or woman, one person or the other wants to have sex with the other. Okay,
Mhm.
and the other person is many times oblivious to the fact. Now,
Okay.
I look, when Harry Met Sally, which is a famous movie about this problem of friendship between men and women. You should check it out. It's an old movie, but a very, very good one.
What's it called?
And When Harry Met Sally,
Okay.
okay, it came out in '87 or '89, something like that. It's very, very funny and very, very true. You see, what happens is that in any relationship between a man and a woman, one of them is going to be attracted to the other, um, but the other might not necessarily be. When I was young, I thought that men and women could be friends, and I thought I had a number of women friends. And then over the years, I discovered that several of these women whom I thought were friends wanted to be with me. And they were really fucking pissed when they realized that they were never going to be with me because I didn't think of them in sexual terms at all. There was one girl in particular, let's call her Paula. When she realized, because she thought that I was like her beta orbiter, waiting for her, right? And I just thought of
Mhm.
her as a friend. And I loved hanging out with her and shooting the shit and talking, and we'd have these long conversations. And what happened was that she all of a sudden started getting closer to the wall, right? And all of a sudden she started calling me up and hanging out more often and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's get together. But like like with a guy friend, you don't always do it. And sometimes you're busy. And I told her, I'm busy, I'm working or this or that. And then finally she just exploded at me. And I was trying to figure out what the hell happened. And through a mutual friend, a woman, she explained that this girl, Paula, had always thought that I was the guy waiting for her. And she was finally ready for a relationship. And I'm like, no, I never thought of her in those terms. I thought she was just, fun to hang out with. She was in the art scene in Chile. And I was into the art scene, at the time I was like collecting pictures and shit like that. Okay. And she had a gallery and shit like that. I mean, we were moved in similar social circles, but I only thought of her like, a friend. I didn't want to bang her. It never even crossed my mind. And she was attractive enough, sure, but she was just not my type. Just not interested. And when she realized this, she was fucking furious. And yeah, that happens all the time. Okay. As I gotten older, I realized men and women cannot be friends. The sex thing always gets in the way. Always, no exception. Okay, except among siblings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
anything else on your mind, Charles?
Well, no, I guess that's it for today. I'll let someone else get a question.
It sounds like you have something on your mind and you thought better of it. What was it? Is it serious or you want to keep it to yourself? Your choice.
Well, honestly, just about like getting girls, really basic stuff.
Shoot. What's your question?
Well, I'm at university and like, obviously it's harder to like get girls and because of COVID and stuff. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really sure because like I can kind of talk to them, but I don't know how really to get close enough to them to actually get on first dates and hang out with them regularly and stuff.
Yeah, I know. It's hard and it's something. It's sort of like an art that you learn along the way. Okay. But see, it's the way to do this is to try as often as you can.
Okay.
It's like, when you play baseball, you want to get at bat as often as you can because you'll get better with practice. It's inevitable.
Yeah, but that's the problem, see, because I'm really like I'm focusing on my studies too, also a lot. Like I'm focused on getting like A grades and stuff. So it's like I don't really have that much time.
This is your first year in university?
Yeah, but like I'm trying to transfer to another better university, so I need to make sure I get like really good grades this year.
Then focus on that.
Yeah, okay.
Put the girl situation on the back burner, okay?
Okay.
But when you're ready to bring it to the front burner, when the rest of your life is settled and you know more or less what's what, and you got it in hand, you got it firmly in hand, this is what you have to do. See, first of all, you got to get in shape, okay? See, what happens is that if you do constant exercise, I mean, like at least 30 minutes of sweating per day, it's not an issue of you gaining muscle. You're just going to look healthier. It's going to be like a subliminal kind of glow, and people will notice it. And women will
I know
find
what you mean. I started working out.
Yeah. You don't have to build like a shit ton of muscles and become like Arnold Schwarzenegger or some shit like that. Okay. All you have to do is get in like 30 minutes of sweating a day so that you get that glow and get a little bit of sun. Okay. And you're set in that regard. Okay. And it'll be generally good for you. Right. And do whatever sport you do, it doesn't matter what the sport is. There are a lot of these red pill people who are like, ooh, lift, it's just retarded. No. Do something that you enjoy. When I was in college, I discovered squash. I love squash. I'm terrible at it, yeah, but I love doing it. And it's a great way for me to do 45 minutes of hard exercise and really get, blood pumping and just really feel good. And that feeling good, it emanates, okay, number one. Number two, what you have to do is you have to set yourself targets of meeting girls and calling girls, and to set up a spreadsheet and say to yourself, okay, every 7 days, every week, I'm going to try to approach at least say 2 girls per day, okay, or 3 girls per day, or however many you think that you can achieve at a reasonable rate, and try to approach X number of girls per day and create a percentage listing of what percentage do you think you can get of their phone number, and from those phone numbers, how many can you get a first date, and from those first dates, how many you can get a second date, and do it systematically. Look at it like a business problem. Look at it like a math problem, okay? When you look at it like that and you set yourself targets and you have some place to register the results, okay, where you can graph it, okay? I mean, how can I put it? Use your autism to your advantage is my point, okay? I mean, every guy who does well in school, who's a smart customer, he's got a little bit of the autist in him, okay? I do, okay? I'm proud to fly my autistic flag, right? Use it to your advantage. Set up schedules, set up targets of results, so that way you can track it over time, because you only get better at any activity by way of practice, okay? So that's my suggestion.
All
I
right,
hope
so
this helps.
basically, yeah, just numb
What?
yourself to rejection and try as many times as you can.
Yeah, basically, because rejection is a part of life, okay? You got to understand something. Getting rejected by a girl is really horrifying the first few times. The first time, it's going to crush you. The second time, the third time. The fourth time, it's not going to hurt that bad. And by the 10th time, you're going to be like, oh, well. Don't like insult the girl who rejects you. Just like shrug your shoulders and move on to the next. By the 10th girl, you won't mind the rejection. And also what will happen is that as you get more relaxed and comfortable, you'll have more success. This is inevitable, okay? But reaching that level of comfort and confidence takes a number of rejections, okay? And you got to understand the principle here, that if you don't make any effort, every time you go up to a girl, you're going to be fucking terrified. And because you're terrified, because you're nervous, you're going to fail every time. But once you get more and more relaxed, because you're used to failure, you get more and more relaxed, you'll be more successful and you'll have less failure. It's inevitable. It's a curve. The curve on the graph is like that, and it's in everything, okay? But what happens is that when you fail more with girls, you fail a lot with girls, you're going to feel pretty miserable. But then you start to succeed. You get better at it, right? And what eventually happens is that, see, that confidence translates into the other aspects of your life, the business aspect of your life, your career aspects of your life. And you'll discover, rather shockingly, that getting rejected by girls is one of the tougher things in life. And the confidence you get from succeeding with girls translates very easily to other very important aspects of your life. That's why it's important that you do this, okay?
Okay.
Keep that in mind. Okay, Charles, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad you're on, man. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. No, I mean, tomorrow, next week.
Yeah, have a good day.
Let me see. Wait, sorry about this. Oh yeah, Sebastian Mendo says, join a frat, Charles. Yeah, I like frats. I don't have a problem with them. I was GDI at Dartmouth. Yeah, Nana. By the way, you know, a lot of people there, when you ask a question, I'm talking to you about it, other people in the chat and the questions put up a lot of really good answers. So yeah. Let me see. Yeah, because I think that a lot of people are answering Eve and they're saying, try a gun range, try salsa classes. Yeah, I took ballroom dancing classes in college. That was a good place to meet girls. Yeah. And somebody says, Abilene, Texas is flat, hot, and there are rattlers. I don't know. I mean, I looked at pictures of it. It seemed very nice, you know? I mean, I've never been there myself, but it seems like a nice town. Anyway, guys, we're coming up on almost 3 hours of this conversation. And so I'm looking at the chat, and most of the people are chatting about stuff unrelated to this shit, okay? So I'm gonna call an end to the webinar. But I just wanna say that, you know, on the one hand, I understand that a lot of these people, these neoliberal Leninists, they're closed-minded. They don't want to listen to reason. They don't want to listen to facts. And yet, on the other hand, a lot of them are our friends, our neighbors, our family, our parents, our siblings, our spouses, maybe even. And so we have to do the hard work of those people, the people closest to us, to not reject them and not do what they want to do, which is reject us. Okay? It's easy to reject somebody and cut them out of your life. Okay? It's easy to do that. It's much harder to try to get them to listen to you, to listen to them, and slowly come to an understanding that is healthier for both of you long term. Okay? I mean, like I said, it's easy to tell somebody to fuck off. It's so fucking easy. But if it's people that you care about and love, you have to be thinking of the long term. I do believe that this period that we are living in, it's going to come to a head, one way or the other. Either this whole shit is gonna like fizzle out and go away, which could happen, or it could wind up in some civil war type situation, you know? Neither would surprise me, to tell you the truth, okay? I do believe that one way or the other, in 10 years, 20 years, this is all behind us, one way or the other. So you got to be thinking insofar as the people close to you, your family, your close friends. You want to be thinking long term in your relationship with them, and therefore not tell them to fuck off when they're spouting some insanity. Okay? It's easy to do that, but don't do it. Try to get them to see reality as it actually is. Make the effort. That's not the final message I anticipated to be giving you guys in this broadcast, but I think it's important. I think it's really easy to just flip somebody the bird, but don't do it with the people you love. Okay? Okay, guys. It was great talking to you as always. As always, there will be another webinar next Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. I hope to see you there. And yeah, thanks so much for listening, and I will catch you next time.